Hey, you made it, and I'm really glad you did. This little corner of the world isn't for everyone. But if you're here, maybe it's exactly what you needed. Before we get too comfy, feel free to like the video and subscribe if you find yourself drifting with the rhythm of it all. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. There's something so comforting about seeing us all gathered here from different places, sharing the same quiet moment. Now, go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or crack the window just a little for that soft nighttime breeze. Let the day melt away. I didn't open my eyes because of sunlight. I opened them because something had died in my blanket, or maybe it was still alive. The smell came first. Thick, sour, clinging. It curled into my nostrils like a fist and punched me awake. For a moment I thought it might be me. That wouldn't be the worst outcome. But no, this was sharper, riper. It had layers. Sweat, mould, old stew, and something sweet underneath, like rotting fruit that had given up on ever being eaten. I rolled over and heard the straw beneath me crunch. Not in a soft, pillow-like way. It crunched like beetles. Or maybe it was beetles. I didn't check. The last time I did, I found a rat under my ribs, curled like a sleeping child. We'd both screamed. He won the bed. My back itched, my neck itched, my everything itched. I didn't scratch. That would mean admitting the lice had won. I pushed myself up slowly, careful not to dislodge the bowl I called a chamber pot. It sat near the wall, warm from the night's deposit. Full, definitely, topped off, if I'm being honest. If I bumped it now, I'd be sleeping in my own soup tonight. My room, a word generous enough to qualify as fraud, was barely the width of my arm span. Stone walls, one wooden beam that groaned every time the weather changed, and a patch of warped floorboards that sagged like a guilty conscience. It held the smells in like secrets. I reached for the wall and ran my fingers along the plaster, cold, damp and slick with something green that hadn't been alive in centuries but refused to leave. My shirt stuck to my back when I stood, wool soaked through with sweat, smoke and a hint of goat. I hadn't been near a goat in weeks, which meant someone else's goat had rubbed off on me. Typical. The window, if you could call it that, was a hole stuffed with a shutter that warped in the rain and refused to shut in the wind. I pushed it open with my elbow. The hinge creaked, the shutter groaned. And then the city breathed on me. Gods. The air hit like meat left in the sun, a dense fog of human discharge, boiled cabbage, smoke and manure. The street below was already waking. Hooves clopped, voices shouted, a baby screamed like it knew what was coming. Somewhere a pig squealed. I didn't know if it was being slaughtered or making love, maybe both. There was a corpse cart rumbling past. I saw it from above. 2 bodies, maybe 3. The driver didn't bother covering them. Why would he? Everyone knew what dead looked like, and worse, what it smelled like. I leaned out and looked down. The alley shimmered, not from sunlight, but from slime, a thick sheen of something that had no name. Yesterday's stew, maybe, or last week's urine. My boots were down there, waiting. I needed to empty the pot. I needed to step outside. I needed to live, but only just. I picked up the chamber pot like it was loaded with gunpowder. It sloshed. I swallowed something in my throat. Pride, nausea, I don't know. I walked to the window, looked down. No one directly below. Good. "Godaloo!" I shouted. It's a courtesy, really. A bastardized warning. Regardez l'eau, they say in the big cities. Watch out for the water. But everyone knows what kind of water. I tilted the pot and let it go. The splash was violent, echoing. Somewhere, someone swore. I closed the shutter and backed away like I'd committed a crime. Technically I had, but so had everyone else in the city. I pulled on my boots, damp, of course. They'd soaked up whatever the alley had cooked up overnight. I didn't wear socks, didn't own socks. I'd once wrapped my feet in cabbage leaves to cushion the blisters. That worked until the rats smelled me coming. Down the stairs, each one a creaking betrayal, I passed the tavern room that doubled as a kitchen and tripled as a pigsty. The innkeeper was asleep in the corner, mouth open, snoring through lips crusted with mead foam. His dog lay beside him, twitching. I hoped it was dreaming and not dying. I opened the door and stepped into the alley. The sun had no power here. The buildings leaned too close. Roofs sagged inward like drunkards whispering secrets. The light tried to touch the stones and failed. But the smells, oh, the smells, they moved freely. My boots sank half an inch into something soft. I didn't look. I didn't ask. I walked. A woman passed carrying a basket of fish. The fish weren't dead. They stared at me. She was barefoot, her toes blurred. Ack with grime and frost. Her breath smelled like vinegar and survival. "Morning," I muttered. She didn't answer. That was fair. At the corner, a man squatted over a gutter. His eyes met mine. He didn't stop. I looked away. That was the rule. We pretended public defecation was private, a courtesy of the unspoken social contract. Break that, and the city broke you back. A dog barked. A real one, not the innkeeper's mutt. This one had teeth and opinions. I avoided its eyes. A boy ran past barefoot, laughing. He splashed through a puddle that steamed slightly. I hoped it was just heat. I hoped a lot of things in this city. The baker's chimney was puffing, a good sign. He hadn't died overnight, yet. I followed the smoke. It meant warmth, bread, or something pretending to be both. I hadn't eaten since, I don't know. I can't remember the last real food I had. Yesterday's dinner was a piece of hard cheese that fought me every bite and a turnip that smelled like it had been grown in secrets. Outside the bakery, a queue of 6, 5 too many. I stood in line. Someone coughed behind me, not the dry, polite kind. The wet, rattling kind that means someone's about to die and take you with them. I stepped forward. The baker opened the hatch and looked out. His face was burned on one side, flour-dusted on the other. He looked at me like he was still deciding if I deserved to eat. "Coin?" he asked. I handed over 2 copper bits. One stuck to my palm with sweat. He made a face and took them anyway. He handed me a crust of bread so hard I could cut rope with it. I took a bite. My teeth screamed. I chewed anyway. I needed to get to the market. I needed herbs. Something to rub on my feet before the skin split open. Something to put in my mouth so the next person I spoke to didn't vomit. The city yawned around me. Roofs coughed smoke. Streets hissed under the weight of urine and soot. Bells rang in the distance. Church or execution? I wasn't sure. Maybe both. This was only the first hour of my day, and already I smelled like I had survived something I couldn't name. Because I had. The rat was still in my bed. I'd forgotten about him, or maybe hoped he was gone, but when I returned after choking down half a loaf of rock-hard bread and stepping through at least 3 kinds of waste, he was there, curled into the shape of someone who'd made peace with his choices. He blinked at me, one eye crusted shut. The other watched me like I was the intruder. I crouched. The straw crunched under my knees. I'd meant to change it weeks ago. You're supposed to sweep it out, toss in fresh stalks, maybe sprinkle herbs to chase away the lice and rot. But straw costs coin, and coin doesn't grow in gutters. So I layered the old stuff, week after week, compacting it into something that smelled like damp parchment and armpits, and now it had tenants. "Move," I whispered to the rat. He didn't flinch. I reached out, not to grab him, just to remind him whose nest this was. He didn't move, just tucked his nose under his tail. I sat back. My knees popped, my breath fogged. The room was colder now. The fire downstairs had gone out and smoke still clung to my clothes like wet guilt. The rat shivered, and I hated myself a little for understanding. I reached into my boot and pulled out the last soft scrap of the bread. I held it out. "Trade," I said. He lifted his head, sniffed, then without hesitation took it and shuffled off into the dark, dragging his prize with the same energy I used to drag myself through mornings. The straw rustled behind him. The itch returned. I stood up and shook out my tunic. The motion stirred the smell up again, sweat, wool, and whatever was growing inside my seams. My shirt stuck to me like I owed it something. I didn't have another. Linen was for people who could afford soap, or the illusion of it. There was no mirror in my room, not that I wanted one. The last time I caught my reflection in a puddle, I thought it was a beggar leaning in to rob us. It turned out it was just me, bent, hollow-eyed, chewing on something I'd stolen from a windowsill. I ran my hand through my hair. The lice scattered like guilty children. My scalp burned where I scratched too hard. I could feel the nits lodged behind my ears. You can't wash them out. You can only pray they migrate to someone richer. Downstairs, the tavern was waking. I heard groaning, not pain, habit, the kind that seeps out of walls and bodies when everyone's been alive too long. I needed to get out. The market was waiting. I had a list in my head, nothing written because parchment costs coin and I barely have memory as it is. I needed vinegar for soaking rags. I needed a strip of cloth that didn't already smell like death. And I needed mint or sage or even pine needles, anything to chew that would make my mouth less offensive than a tanner's privy. Outside, the city coughed. The fog was thicker now, rolling in like punishment. It dragged the stench down with it, trapping it at head height. Breathing was a full-time mistake. I pulled my hood tighter and stepped into the street. My foot squelched immediately. I didn't look down. The trick is to walk like you deserve to be here. Look too cautious, and the city eats you faster. The market was 6 alleys away. Maybe 7, if I detoured around Tanner's Row. Which I should, because Tanner's Row is where dreams and lungs go to die, but it's faster. And I'm desperate. So I went. The air changed 2 steps in, not gradually. One moment it was city rot, the next it was sharp, acidic, wet, like someone boiled leather and old teeth in a pot and poured it over the stones. The tanners were already at work, big vats of lime, pits of urine, men with rolled sleeves stirring hides with sticks longer than scents. Dogs lingered nearby, so did flies. No one swatted them anymore. What's the point? I held my breath and passed through quick. One of the apprentices spat near my feet. It steamed where it landed. "Morning," he muttered. I didn't answer. My tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth, glued there by fear or filth. Beyond the tannery, the smells shifted again. Now it was fish, always fish, never fresh. The market stretched in crooked rows of carts and cloth-tied booths. Vegetables wilted on wooden planks. A pile of leeks slumped like drunkards. The fishmonger's stall was leaking into the street. Something silver twitched in the runoff. I moved past it all. No time to shop. I needed You.There. She sold medicinals, though most of it was bark, mould and superstition. Still, she had mint once. Real mint. She wasn't at her usual spot. My heart dropped, then rose again. There she was, behind her table, rearranging her jars with a precision that made me nervous. You.There never blinked. I didn't know if she physically couldn't, or if she just refused out of spite. Her face was the colour of cold meat, and she wore a bonnet that hadn't been washed since the last king died. "You look worse," she said. "Thanks." She held out a jar. For the breath. I sniffed. It smelled like pickled thyme and disappointment. "How much?" 3 coppers. "I'll give you 1. She stared at me. I gave her 2. She handed me the jar, then added a small cloth bundle. "This one's free." I unwrapped it. "Is this teeth?" "Wolf. Might be lucky." I didn't ask how she got them. I didn't want to know. I chewed the herb. It was bitter, oily, but it burned through the rot coating my mouth. I swallowed. My stomach growled, probably jealous. "Come back if your blood turns black," she said as I left. "Great," I muttered. Something to look forward to. The street was more crowded now. A man was selling eels. Another shouted about apples that looked like bruises in fruit form. A woman chased a child who had stolen a chicken. No one ran to help. It wasn't about morals, it was about speed. If she caught him, it was fair. If she didn't, it was his. I passed a stall selling used shoes. The smell was something between vinegar and shame. One pair had toes already worn through. Another had a rat sleeping inside. Not mine, different rat. Or maybe the same one, ambitious. I kept walking. In the centre of the market, a man collapsed. Just dropped. No sound, no drama. One moment upright, the next face down in a puddle that hadn't been water in weeks. People looked. No one moved. A merchant stepped around him. Another spat near him. No one screamed. Eventually, someone dragged him by the ankles toward the alley. That's what we do. Clear the street, keep things moving. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. My legs moved by instinct now. Not fear, not duty, just rhythm. I had the jar. I had the herbs. I had 2 coins left. And back home, I had a straw bed that smelled like wet history and a rat who probably missed me. The day wasn't over. Not even close. But I'd made it this far. And in this city, that's enough to count as winning. The moment I step back inside, I regret it. My room swallows me whole. It doesn't smell like home. It smells like something trying to die, but not being allowed to. Damp wool, burnt oil, breath trapped in cloth. It hits me all at once, like I'd stepped into someone else's rot. The rat's gone again. I don't see him, but I hear the straw rustle. It's not a sound anymore, it's a rhythm. The music of decay. Every time I shift my foot, it responds like the bed is breathing under me. I go to the window. The shutter's warped. I have to kick it from below to make it budge. The hinge screams like it's remembering torture. I brace my palm against the edge and push until the rust gives way and it lurches open. And there it is, the outside. The breath of the city slams into me. Full force, no warning. It's not air. It's a confession. 1,000 sins exhaled at once, still steaming from their guilt. Boiling meat, old shoes, fish guts drying on slate, waste soaking into straw, rotting wood that's never been dry. It seeps into me. I blink hard. I want to step back, but I don't. Because I need to see. I need to know the world's still there. Below, the alley has changed again. It always does, depending on the hour. Earlier, it was just mud and shouting. Now, it's a theatre. A butcher is washing his stall with a bucket of red water. Not blood. Not water, something in between. His apron is so soaked it hangs like skin. A dog follows every splash, licking the stones, tail wagging. Farther down, a woman is arguing with a man over a dead chicken. The bird lies between them, neck twisted, feet curled. Neither claims it, but neither wants to give it up either. He says she poisoned it. She says it was hers before it died. No one interrupts. That's the rule. Don't get involved unless someone bleeds. A priest walks past them, nose covered with a perfumed cloth. His robe drags through something He doesn't look down. I wonder if he'll bless the stain later. I lean farther out the window, arms braced on the sill. My sleeves catch the breeze and flutter weakly. I can smell myself in the wind. Smoke, sweat, the faint trace of You.There's herb paste still clinging to my teeth. It's better than before, but only just. Across the alley, another window opens. A girl leans out, no older than 10. Her face is smudged, her hair braided in knots, and her arms rest on the sill like she owns the block. She watches the argument over the chicken like it's a puppet show. She sees me. Doesn't wave, doesn't smile, just looks. I nod. She doesn't respond. Then her hand comes up, slow, casual, and she flicks something from her window. It sails down and lands with a soft splash. I don't look to see what it was. I already know. She disappears inside. Shutter slams. That's the game. You watch until someone notices. Then you remind them you're part of it too. I pull back. My fingers are sticky from touching the window frame. I wipe them on my tunic. Now it's worse. Whatever was in the wood has joined my sweat. I smell like a cupboard where bad things happen. I sit on the edge of the straw. The itch returns immediately. No use. I can't stay here. I have nowhere else to go. I look at the wall. Someone scratched initials into the plaster years ago. Half worn off, half defaced. Underneath it, someone else drew a crude face. Big eyes, open mouth, crooked teeth. I stare at it sometimes, just to remember what people are. The face stares back. I should eat something, but I already did. No, I should drink something. The thought of water makes my stomach clench. Not because I'm thirsty, because I know what counts as water here. The bucket downstairs is from the well near Tanner's Row. We boil it first, most of the time. Sometimes we forget, or we pretend we boiled it, or we add ale and convince ourselves it's clean. I grab my cup. Clay. Chipped. The lip is rough enough to cut me when I drink too fast. I check the corner where I stash the flask. It's still there, half full. Watered ale. Heavy on the water. I sip. It tastes like wet bread and something metallic. I drink anyway. It burns in my stomach, not from heat, but from memory. I glance out the window again. Something new. A cart is moving up the alley. It creaks like it's in pain. 2 men push it. No horse, just muscle and anger. It's stacked with barrels, unlabelled. The wood is dark, slick with something. I know that cart. It belongs to the tanner. That means the barrels are full of skin. Treated maybe, maybe not. The cart hits a dip in the stones. One of the barrels wobbles, rolls slightly, then settles back. One of the men spits. The other lifts his hand and waves toward my window. Not at me, at someone above. I follow his gaze. Another shutter opens. 3rd floor. A woman leans out, face smeared with something white. Powder, ash, maybe chalk. Her hair is twisted into a braid so tight I can see the strain in her temples. She blows a kiss. The man below winks, then slaps the side of the cart. They roll on. I look away. Everything down there is moving. People, animals, fluids. But nothing feels alive, not properly. The light shifts. Clouds above me churn like they've swallowed too much ash. I think it might rain, which means the streets will flood. Not cleanly. Rain here doesn't wash, it stirs. It lifts the rot from the cracks and spreads it. I close the shutter. It doesn't latch properly, never has. I wedge a bit of cloth into the gap. The breeze pushes against it, but it holds, for now. The room is darker again. I sit back. There's nothing here, nothing except me, the rat, and the echoes of other people's lives leaking through the cracks. I lie back on the straw. It's warm again, not comforting, just wet. The kind of warmth that makes you think twice about breathing too deep. My fingers find a lump, a forgotten crust of bread or a folded rag. I pull it out. It's hard, smells like wax. It's a candle stub. I light it. The smoke is thick, it drifts up and clings to the ceiling. The light doesn't chase the dark, it just highlights it, makes it feel closer. I hold the stub in my fingers and stare at the flame. Outside I hear another shout. "Godaloo!" The splash comes seconds later. Someone curses. The rat rustles in the straw. I don't move. I should have known better. I'd opened the window. I'd smelled the city. I knew what was waiting. But when I opened the door and stepped outside, I forgot. I took a breath. A full, lung-filling breath. That was my first mistake. It wasn't air that entered, it was heat, moist and immediate, as if the alley exhaled just for me. It coated my throat, ran down my tongue, and filled my chest with something too thick to swallow, but too fast to stop. I gagged. Not from the stink, not at first. From the weight of it. The sheer presence of breath that didn't belong to me. The air tasted like boiled offal and wet wool, a kind of meaty sweetness, like something stewed too long in a pot, scraped too rarely. Beneath that was something sharper, sewer gas, rotting grain, maybe even blood. All of it swirling, layered, alive. I stood there for a moment frozen, waiting to adjust. I never did. The street was already busy. boots slapping cobbles, hooves clattering, the wet slap of bare feet against stones, slick with who knows what. I pulled my hood tighter, not for warmth, for protection, for the illusion of separation. A man bumped into me, muttered something I didn't catch. His cloak smelled of pipe ash and mutton fat. I stepped aside. He didn't. 2 women passed me next. One carried a basket of bread so stale it could have doubled as bricks. The other held a live chicken by the feet. The bird was silent, either dead or wise enough to play dead. I turned toward the main street, boots sticking slightly with each step. The gutter beside me overflowed, not with water. It never held water. It was a mix of waste and runoff and all the city's regrets. A stew of everything poured out windows and doors, flowing sluggishly toward no drain, no outlet, just pooled shame. I passed a child crouched beside it, poking it with a stick. He looked up at me, grinned, then wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Adin returned to his experiment. I didn't ask what he was fishing for. I didn't want to know if he ever caught it. The sun tried to burn through the haze, but only made things worse. It warmed the stink, woke it up, gave it legs. The smell of sun-baked offal is different from its cold version, warmer, sweeter, hungrier. A butcher dragged a wooden tub out onto the cobbles. Blood sloshed from the rim. He dumped the water with a grunt, letting it roll down the slope into the gutter. The tide turned red. The child giggled and followed it downstream. I held my breath again, too late. The smell clung to the inside of my nose. Breathing out didn't help. It was in me now. At the square, a group had gathered around a preacher standing on a crate. He was shouting about fire, brimstone and mould. Always the mould. Said it grew in our hearts like it did in our bread. He waved a piece of green-flecked rye like a holy relic. I moved past. I'd heard it all before. The mould's not in the bread. It's in the air, in the walls, in our lungs. My boots found the edge of something soft. I stopped, looked down. Animal, unidentifiable. Ribcage partially exposed, the skin sloughing off like wet paper. No one had moved it. No one would. It wasn't worth dragging away. I stepped over it. A man sneezed near me. Loud, wet, no hand, no cloth, just spray. I veered left. That saved me from walking into a goat, barely. It trotted past, eyes blank, tail twitching. A boy followed, slapping its rear with a stick. The square opened in front of me. Wide, muddy, loud. Stalls lined the perimeter. Meat, bread, herbs, used tools, used shoes, and used morals. Vendors shouted over each other, voices hoarse from years of competition and smoke. I didn't come to buy, I came to move. Through the square, past the crowd, toward the far alley where I'd stashed a few coins, not buried, just hidden, beneath a loose stone behind a baker's stall. I didn't trust anyone else with my coin, I barely trusted the stone. On my way, a man shoved a pie in my direction. "Beef," he declared. It smelled like shoe. "Fresh," he insisted. I gave him a look and walked on. Another stall sold roasted nuts. The oil smoked in a pan blackened from years of fire and desperation. The vendor stirred it with a stick that might have once been part of a broom. The smell, somehow, was good, tempting. My stomach turned, not in rejection but in longing. But I had no coin. Not yet. I found the baker's stall. He was facing away, arguing with a woman over flour weight. His voice rose and fell like dough left to rise too long. I crouched casually near the back, looked around. No one watching. I lifted the stone. The gap was still there, a hole just big enough for 2 fingers. I reached in. The coin was gone. I froze. Checked again. Dug deeper. Pulled back a piece of something wet. Bread? No. Cloth? Mouldy. Empty. My stomach dropped. That was 3 coppers. Everything I had. Gone. I stood slowly. The baker turned, saw me, narrowed his eyes. "Didn't steal nothing," I said before he could speak. He grunted. Didn't believe me. Didn't care enough to do anything. I backed away. The stink followed. Now it smelled like defeat. I walked blindly, not caring where, weaving through stalls, past people, deeper into the square. The noise blurred, words lost shape. The city pulsed, a beast with breath and blood and no mercy. I found myself beside the public well. A crowd had gathered, women mostly, with buckets and pails. The water was being drawn slowly, winch groaning with each turn. The bucket came up slick and full, sloshing over the rim. One woman dipped her rag in and wiped her son's face. He flinched like it hurt. A man beside me muttered, "Might as well wash with spit." I moved on, past the coop where chickens clucked in terrified harmony, past the smithy where fire danced and iron screamed, past the scribe's door, sealed shut with a waxed cloth to keep the damp from his parchment. All the while the smell shifted, evolved, from sewage to sweat, from blood to sour yeast, from breath to something I couldn't name but felt behind my eyes. I tried not to gag, tried not to swallow. I failed. That was my second mistake. I should have emptied it last night. The chamber pot, my own little vessel of despair. It sat in the corner like a threat all morning, bloated and smug. I'd ignored it when I woke, ignored it again after the rat, and again when I left to find herbs, water, something that resembled control. Now it was full, more than full. A trembling dome sat at the surface, meniscus unbroken only by divine mercy. One wrong step and it'd slosh over. The smell had long since gone from tolerable to chemical. So I lit the candle stub again, not for light, but as tribute, a prayer by flame. I picked up the pot, both hands, arms straight, careful not to tilt. It was warm, still. That was the worst part. I made my way to the window. The shutter creaked open like it knew what I was about to do and disapproved. I leaned out, looked down. The alley was busy. A woman in a red shawl walked by, balancing a bundle of firewood. Behind her, a boy ran, trailing a dog on a string. Farther down, a cart rolled past, its wheels dragging a puddle of grey behind them like a shadow. I waited. 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 They passed. I lifted the pot. "Godaloo," I shouted. "It's the law." Or close enough. A warning yelled loud enough for the street to hear, and if they didn't, well, that's on them. I tipped the pot. The splash was biblical. It hit with a sickening slap, thick and final. A second later, someone screamed. Not a polite scream, not a surprise scream. A scream with vowels stretched too far, like they were trying to pull the filth out of their own lungs with sound. I winced, didn't look. Looking never helps. Someone swore, loud, hoarse, wet with anger. I ducked back inside and shut the shutter with a flick of my wrist. It bounced on its warped hinge but held. I leaned against the wall. Breathed. Mistake. The room smelled worse now. The pot was empty, but the ghost of it remained, soaked into the walls, into me. My hands were wet, not from spillage, but from holding it. The clay had sweated through, my palms itched. Down below, the shouting continued, someone accusing, someone denying, someone swearing vengeance. That was how neighbours were made, or enemies, often both. I went to the basin in the corner, poured the last of my vinegar water over my hands. It stung, always did. My knuckles were raw, my fingertips burned. I dried them on the sleeve of my tunic, which achieved nothing except moving the stench from one part of me to another. The rat watched from the straw, silent, judging. I sat, listened. Outside, the city carried on. The screaming had faded, replaced by hammering from the blacksmiths, someone crying 2 alleys over, and the faint chant of a preacher weaving through the maze of rooftops. Always preaching, always doom. I laid back. Let my spine sink into the straw. The smell of vinegar couldn't compete with the bed. My back was a map of bites, raised welts, small red hills and the occasional burning line from where I'd scratched too deep in the night. I shifted, found the one soft spot and let myself rest. Just for a minute. But rest doesn't last here. Someone knocked. Once, twice. I sat up. Another knock. Louder. The sound of wood against knuckles that didn't care if the bones broke. I stood, wiped my hands again on my thighs, and opened the door a crack. It was Hal. He lived 2 doors down, a barrel-chested man with hands like dinner plates and breath that could peel bark. He was soaked. His face was wet, his tunic too, his boots squelched when he shifted his weight. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Then he sniffed. Long, purposeful. "You throw a pot?" he asked. I didn't answer. He took a step forward. The floor creaked under his weight. I heard "Godaloo." Thought that meant warning. It did. Didn't sound like it. Maybe you're deaf. Maybe you're stupid. We stared at each other. Then he smiled, a slow, toothless grin. "Next time, wait," he said. And then he turned and walked away. That was forgiveness, or a promise, depending on his mood next time. I closed the door, locked it. Not that it mattered. The latch barely held. The frame was soft with rot. A solid kick would send it flying. I sat again. The pot steamed in the corner. I cleaned it technically. A quick rinse, a swish, good enough for now, but it still glowed faintly in my mind. A presence, a warning. You live with it. That's what no one tells you about city life. You live with the smell, with the guilt, with the eyes that meet yours from the street when they're dripping in your sins. And with the knowledge that you'll do it again tomorrow, because there's nowhere else for it to go. No plumbing, no drainage, just walls and wind and the promise that someone else will duck faster next time. I picked up the candle stub, lit it again, watched the flame dance. It barely gave off light, mostly smoke. I held it close to my hand. The heat soothed. Outside, footsteps passed. Someone humming, a child crying, a bucket spilling. The city never stops, it just changes rhythm. I laid down again, arms folded, eyes open. The rat crept closer. I didn't stop him. He curled beside me, warm, still, better company than most. The alley doesn't just stink, it has texture. The kind you feel before you see, the kind that clings to your soles and squeezes through the seams in your boots. I took one step out of the tavern's rear door and felt the earth shift beneath me like I'd stepped onto a tongue. I didn't ask what it was. Didn't look down. Looking down is how you lose nerve. Looking down is how you find out the squish was more than water. I kept walking. The sun was barely awake. A smear of dull light bled between rooftops, casting everything in grey. Grey walls, grey fog, grey choices. The alley stretched ahead, crooked and narrow, choked with shadows and wet air. The walls leaned inward like old men whispering secrets, and the stones underfoot wept softly. Something squelched to my left. I turned just enough to catch movement. A cat, maybe, or something once shaped like a cat. It slithered into the darkness between two barrels and vanished. The barrels themselves bulged, swollen from rain maybe, or stuffed with things better left unnamed. One had a smear of something black dripping from its rim, slow and thick. It hadn't rained in days. I pulled my hood up, not for the weather, for armour. The air grew heavier with every step, the kind that curls behind your ears and nestles in your collar. I passed a tangle of rags hanging from a second-story window, someone's washing, one shirt, one sock, a scrap of lace, all stained, all dripping. Dripping what? I didn't ask. Further in, the stones disappeared beneath a layer of something. Not quite mud, not quite filth. It shifted under my weight. I stepped lighter, not slower, just careful. At the bend, a man hunched against a wall, legs pulled up, arms folded. His face was a mess of bruises and beard. His eyes were closed, mouth slightly open. One of his boots was missing. I paused, watched, waited for breath. None came. I stepped around him. The stink was different here, not sharper, just older, like something had been soaked into the stones for generations and was now seeping back out in protest. The alley curved again, leading toward Tanner's Row. I hadn't meant to go that way. My feet decided. Or the alley did. Tanner's Row was the city's throat, always coughing up steam and cries. Leather hung like skin from hooks. Tubs bubbled with lime and urine. The men there never smiled. Their arms were stained to the elbow and their eyes looked past you. I tried to pass quick, didn't make it. "Oi!" one called. "You lost?" "No." "You stink like goat's milk and old soup." I didn't stop. Another voice joined. "Betty sleeps with a chamber pot." They laughed. I didn't answer. Not because they were wrong, because they weren't worth the breath. At the far end of the alley, a wagon blocked the way, half loaded with hides. A wheel was stuck in the muck. One of the tanners stood behind it, arms folded, waiting for help that would never come. I turned back, not to face them, just the other way, which meant more alley, more texture. I walked faster now, boots sliding, breath shallow. A rat darted between my feet, big, bold, carried a bone in its mouth like a trophy. I didn't flinch. You learn not to. Flinching invites notice. I passed a windowless door. The wood was blackened, not with paint, but time. Scratches carved the lower half. Animal, maybe, maybe not. Another barrel. This one tipped over. Its contents spilled into the gutter. I didn't stop to identify them. The alley narrowed again, a place so tight I had to turn sideways. My shoulder brushed brick, wetness soaked through, not rain, never rain. Something buzzed near my ear. A fly, fat and loud. It landed on my neck. I slapped it without thinking. Missed. Its brother landed on my lip. I spat. Tasted iron. At the end of the passage, the alley opened into a wider yard. Mud, straw, broken crates. A horse stood tethered to a post, ribs showing, eyes dull. It stared through me like I wasn't real. I stood there, in the yard, boots now layered with at least 3 types of slime, chest tight. This city doesn't just stink. It wraps around you. It pulls you in. You think you're walking through it, but you're not. You're being swallowed. I turned to leave. The alley behind me pulsed. I swear it did. Like it breathed. Back on the main street things felt louder. Not cleaner, just louder. Voices, hammers, carts, distractions. I paused beneath an overhang, reached into my pocket, pulled out Goethe's herb scrap, chewed it. It didn't help. Nothing could. Not after that alley. I rubbed my boot against the curb. It squelched. Something clung to the sole. Grey-brown, fibrous. I didn't ask, didn't scrape. I just walked. And the alley behind me waited, because it always waits. Hunger doesn't tap gently. It punches. By mid-morning, my stomach had started to cave in on itself. My legs carried me on spite. My mouth tasted of stale herbs and vinegar. And my last scrap of bread had vanished 2 bites ago, chewed dry and bitter in the shadow of an alley that wanted to consume me whole. I needed food, real food, or whatever passed for it here. The butcher's stall stood at the corner of the square, just past the shrine with the melted saints and the gossiping widows. He didn't need a sign. You found him by smell. The scent hit first, blood, fat, and metal. It wrapped around your throat and dragged you closer like a debt collector. The butcher stood behind a plank table slick with old grease. His arms were bare, pink and raw from wrist to elbow, as if the meat was fighting back. He wore no apron, just layers of stains and a grin carved into a face built for bad news. "Looking for lunch?" he asked. I said nothing, just looked. The selection wasn't good. It was never good. Flies danced lazily over ribs, livers, kidneys, something coiled and wet. A haunch of something unidentifiable lay at the edge, partially singed. A pig, maybe, or a dog. I didn't ask. He gestured at a slab of meat roughly the size of my hand. It jiggled slightly in the breeze, not from the wind, from within. "Fresh," he said. It twitched. I stared at it. Then it winked. Not literally, but it shifted. Pulsed once. A spasm, reflex maybe, or muscle memory, or proof that death hadn't stuck yet. My stomach overruled my reason. "How much?" I asked. "3 coppers. I'll give you 1, he snorted. 2 and you don't ask where it came from." I hesitated. A fly landed on it. The meat twitched again. The fly didn't move. I reached into my coat and pulled out the last of my coin. 2 copper pieces, rubbed so smooth the king's face was nothing but a ghost. I handed them over. He dropped the meat into a strip of greasy cloth, handed it to me like a trophy. "No refunds," he said. I walked away. The crowd parted just enough to let me through. No one looked twice. Everyone was too busy not seeing the meat in their own hands. Behind the baker's stall, near a cracked barrel and a fence that leaned like it had given up, I crouched and unwrapped my prize. It still glistened, still trembled, still maybe twitched. I sniffed it. No rot, no obvious taint. Just raw flesh, and something faintly sour, like fear, soaked in salt. I tore a chunk with my teeth. Chewed. The texture was elastic, tendon, not muscle. I forced it down. Another bite, smaller. This one had more flavour, iron mostly, and salt, and something I didn't want to name. I ate it all, quickly, before I could talk myself out of it. When I stood, my legs felt stronger. Not much, but enough. I wiped my hands on the cloth, folded it, tucked it into my coat. It smelled like regret now. I'd burn it later, if I could find fire. Back on the main road, the city had shifted again. Market stalls pulled back, replaced by crates and empty baskets. The crowd thinned, the noise dulled. A lull between morning chaos and midday screams. The butcher saw me as I passed. "You'll live," he called out. "I always do," I muttered. He laughed. It was not a kind sound. I walked with purpose now. Not because I had one, but because aimlessness makes you a target. You either move like you belong, or you wait to be questioned. I didn't feel like answering today. Past the well, women still scrubbing their shame into the stones. Past the candlemaker's shed, windows covered with waxed cloth to keep the stink from escaping. Past the alley where a man once tried to sell me a duck with 2 heads. I'd declined. Politely. The meat sat in my stomach like a debt I hadn't paid yet. Warm. Heavy. Shifting. I pushed the thought down. Near the tannery I paused again. The smell was somehow worse today, sharper, the kind that flays your nostrils and coats your teeth. I leaned on a crate briefly, catching my breath. A dog passed, skinny, ribs visible. It sniffed the air near me, then turned away. Even the animals knew. From down the lane a voice called, "Meat boy!" I turned. The butcher was waving something. I approached, cautious. "You dropped this," he said. He held out a scrap of something, not cloth, not food, a sliver of bone, flat, yellow, still wet. "Was inside," he said. "Thought maybe you'd want the rest." "I'm good," I said. He grinned. "Your loss." He tossed it. Behind him, into a bucket. Something inside hissed. I backed away. "No thank you. Not today." The twitching was enough. I made my way back toward the slums, cutting across alleys where the cobbles gave up entirely and mud took over. The meat moved inside me. Not digestion, no, something slower, colder, like it hadn't finished dying yet. At a low wall near the fishmonger's yard, I stopped, leaned, watched the street. Children ran barefoot, chasing a wheel with a stick. One of them tripped and skinned his knee. He got up, kept running, blood be damned. A woman passed carrying a sack of onions. They left a trail. No one picked them up. I shifted my weight. My stomach gurgled. Loud. Alive. I straightened. No more meat for today. Maybe ever. I went to find Goethe. Not because I trusted her. No one in this city with clean fingernails and a permanent stall deserves trust. But because she had something I needed. Herbs, the kind that kill taste, the kind that make your stomach believe it's forgiven. The meat I'd eaten was sitting heavy, twitching somewhere beneath my ribs. It hadn't made me sick yet, but I could feel it testing the walls, pushing, stretching, waiting to become a mistake. I took the back lanes, past the cracked statue of the saint with no nose, past the collapsed gutter where children used to hide rats for sport. Goethe's stall lived in the eastern corner of the square, wedged between a fishmonger and a man who sold jars of air. She claimed her stall had roots. Literally, she said the table grew from the cobblestones. I believed her. It never moved, and nothing around it stayed alive for long. I saw her before she saw me. Or maybe she saw me first. Hard to say. She never blinked. Her eyes were pale, like milk gone sour, ringed in pink and shadow. Her face was lean, sharp bones and flat skin, like she'd once been full and life had slowly chewed her down. Her hands moved constantly, even when they didn't need to, sorting herbs, grinding seeds, arranging teeth. Always teeth. She had jars of them. Canine, molar, human, maybe not. Some still had root threads clinging, some were black, others gold-capped. One jar was labelled luck, another second chances. She didn't believe in signs, she believed in reminders. I stepped forward. Her head tilted slightly, like I was a bird she didn't recognise. "You look hollow," she said. "Better than full," I answered. She reached for a small bundle wrapped in linen, untied it. Inside were dried sprigs, greyish-green, brittle, dusted with some kind of powder. "For the stomach," she said, "and whatever else you swallowed." I didn't tell her about the meat. She already knew. "How much?" I asked. "1 copper." I fished it from my pocket. As I handed it over, she dropped the herb into my palm, and with it, something hard. A tooth, small, yellow, still wet. I looked at it. "Don't need this," I said. "You will." "What is it?" "Something that fell out of someone important." "Do I want it?" "No," she said, "but you should keep it anyway." I didn't argue. There are people in this city you bargain with. Goethe isn't one of them. I slipped the bundle into my pocket. The tooth stayed with it. She leaned closer across the table. "You're not eating properly," she said. "Trying. You're shaking. It's cold." "It's not." She was right. The sun was out now, weak and hazy, but warm. The alley steamed. A fish head rotted 3 feet from my boots. I felt sweat collect at the base of my spine, but still, my hands trembled. "Too much bile," she muttered. "Or something worse." "Same thing," she said. I wanted to ask what she meant. I didn't. Instead, I pointed at a jar of pale powder behind her. "What's that?" She didn't turn. "Ground frog spine." "Useful?" "No." "Why sell it?" "To see who asks." We stood in silence. Her fingers moved over her table again, sorting, lining, tapping small jars like keys on a locked door. I realised then that the jars were in patterns, not rows, not stacks. Shapes, circles, crosses. One was a spiral. I stepped back. "Careful in the alleys," she said. "Always." "No," she corrected. "Tonight." I didn't ask how she knew I'd be out. She always knew things she shouldn't. Not through magic, just the kind of seeing that comes from watching too much for too long. I turned to leave. "Take this," she called. I turned. She tossed me a sprig wrapped in waxed cloth. It hit my chest. I caught it before it fell. "For your dreams." "I don't have those anymore." "Keep it anyway." I didn't say goodbye. Goethe doesn't do goodbyes. Just warnings disguised as gifts. I moved back through the market, teeth clenched against the meat still curling inside me. My fingers toyed with the bundle. It left a bitter smell on my skin, acrid, sharp, herbal, the kind of smell that tells your body, spit this out or burn. I turned down an alley that used to house a baker's boy I knew. He'd died last winter, got caught stealing fat from the tannery fire. They found his boots, but not the rest. Dogs had been fat that week. The alley hadn't changed. Still slick, still leaning, still hungry. I passed 3 shutters and a corpse. Not fresh, just part of the wall now. People tossed rags over it, out of habit or respect. The sun reached the rooftops. High noon. Someone above me dumped water, maybe water, into the street. It splashed. Steam rose. The heat made the smell bloom like rot in bloom. I paused, unwrapped the herb Goethe gave me, and chewed. It tasted like ashes and metal. I swallowed anyway. Better this than twitching meat. Better this than whatever dream waited in the alley's mouth. I passed back into the open street. Children played with bones. A preacher shouted about the sky falling. Someone else screamed, wordless. I kept walking. The tooth in my pocket dug into my thigh. I didn't move it. Some gifts don't want to be relocated. My tooth had been threatening me since dawn. By midday, it was making demands. Not a dull ache, a pulse, a living thing beneath the gum, thudding in time with my heartbeat, pressing against bone like it wanted out. No rot, not yet, just pressure. Infection maybe, or a splintered root, or punishment for that twitching meat I tore through earlier like hunger had swallowed me whole. Either way, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The barber surgeon's stall sat 3 streets south of Goethe, tucked between a coop that never had chickens and a laundry line strung with rags stained more with blood than soap. The sign was crude. A pole, painted red and white, chipped so badly the colours had run together like a wound. Inside, it stank. Not of herbs or salves or anything remotely clean, just blood, old blood, boiled bone, grease, wet hair. The room had no corners, just surfaces, tables scarred with knife cuts, hooks bent into new angles, jars full of floating parts, tools laid out like a butcher's confession, saws, blades, clamps, pliers, all with the same dull shine of overuse. He stood at the centre, sleeves rolled, arms veined with corded tension. Barber first, surgeon second. That's how the order goes. "Problem?" he asked, not looking at me. "Tooth?" He pointed at the chair. I sat. It wasn't a chair, it was a former chair. The back was missing, the seat was stained, the arms were worn smooth by centuries of clenching. He stepped close and grabbed my chin. Cold hands, thick fingers. He forced my mouth open before I could speak again. "Which one?" he asked, poking roughly. "Back left." He pressed it. Pain exploded behind my eye. I grunted, flinched. He grunted back. That one. "No pulling," I managed to say. "Just look." He stepped away, rummaged through a drawer, pulled out a rusted hook and a cloth soaked in something brown. "Bite this," he said. "What is it?" "Doesn't matter." He shoved it into my hand. I stared at it. He approached with the pliers. Wide, heavy, iron things that looked like they'd been made for horseshoes. "I can still chew," I started. "Not for long," he said. I opened my mouth, because I didn't have another option. He didn't count, didn't warn, just pressed the pliers into my mouth, found the molar, and twisted. Pain ripped through me like lightning made of glass. It sparked in my jaw and burned across my scalp, curling my toes in my boots. I tasted copper, then iron, then something worse. I screamed around the cloth, bit down so hard I almost cracked it. The tooth didn't come out in one go. He adjusted, twisted again. I kicked the chair leg, something cracked, wood or bone. Another pull, then it popped. Blood gushed immediately, warm and thick and full of spite. He stepped back and dropped the tooth in a tin bowl. It clinked, a familiar sound. He handed me a cloth. I pressed it to my mouth. It soaked red in seconds. "Clean break," he said. I couldn't speak. My whole face was on fire. My tongue couldn't find its place. The hole in my jaw throbbed like a drum. I could feel the pulse behind my eyes now, louder than before. He wiped his pliers on his apron, tossed the cloth aside. "That's 1 copper," he said. I reached into my pocket with shaking fingers, dug out the last coin, dropped it into his palm. He didn't thank me, just turned to the next person in line, a child holding a broken finger and a mother already weeping. I staggered out into the street. The light was too bright. The wind touched the blood on my lips and made it sting. I tasted air and flesh. My breath felt wet. I leaned against the nearest wall. Someone passed, stared. "Bad day?" they asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The bleeding didn't stop. Not right away. I wandered down an alley, cloth pressed to my face, boots dragging through puddles. Every breath pulled pain through my skull. Every step made my heart beat faster, which made the wound beat faster, which made me hate everything. The city watched. Windows opened, closed, a door creaked, a cat hissed. Somewhere someone laughed. Not at me, not yet. I needed water. Real water. I knew a spout behind the candlemaker's hut. Old pipe, cracked at the bend, cold enough to numb the skin, sometimes clear. I found it, bent down, let it trickle onto my cloth. The blood washed out slowly. I rinsed my mouth, spat. The alley floor turned red. The taste didn't leave. It clung to my teeth, even the ones still intact. It crept into my sinuses behind my eyes. I pressed the cloth back into place and sat on a crate. Watched the sky. It was grey again, not storm grey, just tired. I pulled the tooth out of my pocket. Not mine. Goethe's, still yellow, still wet. I stared at it, held it up to the light, wondered if she'd known, wondered if this was the one I was supposed to lose. I tucked it back into the cloth, folded it twice, and pushed it deep into my coat. The hole in my mouth throbbed like a second heartbeat. The blood had slowed. The pain hadn't. Back in the main street, I passed the butcher. He waved. I didn't stop, still chewing. While he called. I kept walking. The cloth in my mouth was pink now, faded, dried at the edges. I needed to rest, but I wouldn't sleep. Not after what Goethe gave me. Not with that tooth in my pocket. Not with this pain echoing in my skull like a warning I hadn't earned yet. I don't know why I thought today was a good day to flirt. Maybe it was the blood loss. Maybe the twitching meat had finally reached my brain. Maybe I just needed something, anything, that didn't stink of decay and regret. I was leaning against a wall near the square, cloth still pressed to my jaw, when I saw her. She was standing outside the spice stall, eyeing a pile of coriander like it might confess something. Her sleeves were rolled, fingers stained with something reddish-brown, berries maybe. Her braid was too neat for this city, too intentional, like she still believed the world could be managed with combs. She turned, and she smiled. Not at me, just near me. But that was enough. After a day of twitching meat, bone-tugging surgery, and streets that oozed from underneath, a smile felt like fire in winter. I straightened, tucked the bloodied cloth into my pocket, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. Big mistake. It smeared red across my cheek. She looked at me again, this time directly. My mouth moved before my brain caught up. "You like spices?" I asked. Stupid question. She was standing in front of them. But that's what came out. She raised an eyebrow. "Better than flies and mould." I laughed, tried to be charming. It came out as a sort of cough. Then I spoke again. "Maybe I can buy you a—" She flinched, mid-sentence, mid-smile. Her nose wrinkled. Her hand rose to her mouth. Not a gasp, a gag. She turned her head, eyes watering. My words trailed off. The air between us thickened, not with tension, with odour. It hit me a second later. Hot, sour, metallic. From the meat? Maybe. From the tooth? Definitely. From the city? Always. I tasted it myself now. Boiled rot, herbs dying on my tongue, the sharp sting of old vinegar and iron from the hole in my jaw. I stepped back. She didn't slap me, she didn't curse, she just walked away. Quickly. Not running, but purposeful. Like I was something to be avoided. A pile, a mess, a warning. I stood there a while, letting the shame settle into my skin like everything else. A boy passed me, holding a skinned rabbit. He looked up, sniffed, and said, "Ugh," before trotting off. I didn't stop him. He wasn't wrong. I turned toward the fountain. A trickle ran down from a cracked lion's mouth. The water was mostly clean. I bent low, cupped my hands, rinsed my mouth. It didn't help. The stink was inside me, so I did the only thing I could. I laughed. Not loudly, not madly, just enough to let the city know I got the joke. I wiped my mouth again, spat the bitterness into the gutter, and moved on. I wandered into the cloth quarter, a row of stalls with dye buckets boiling, steam rising in thick clouds of blue and green. The air burned, not the stink, real heat, the kind that peels. A man passed me carrying a bolt of yellow silk over his shoulder, rich, clean. I stepped out of his way like he was royalty. He didn't look at me. The woman who ran the dye pit near the corner nodded at me. I nodded back. She offered me a cloth. "Smells better than you," she said. I took it, pressed it to my face. Lavender, almost, burned my nose. She grinned. 2 coppers. "I'm broke." She took it back. The gesture didn't hurt. The truth did. I moved past a row of hanging linens, still dripping. One caught my shoulder, left a damp streak across my back. I didn't stop to fix it. A man was gutting fish 3 stalls down. The scent mixed with the lavender and turned the world inside out. I held my breath, walked faster, turned left. And there she was again, the woman from the spice stall. She hadn't gone far, just around the bend. She stood by a cart selling apples. Bad ones, bruised and soft. She picked one up, turned it in her hand. I hesitated, then walked past. Didn't stop, didn't look. Let her have that space. Let her keep the memory of me as a punchline, not a plague. At the far edge of the cloth market, I found a stool. Sat, let my jaw hang loose. The hole ached again, slow and steady. A dog lay nearby, thin, mangy, snoring. I watched it for a while, watched people pass, watched the city forget me again. Then I took Goethe's herb bundle from my pocket, the one for breath, unwrapped it, held it under my nose, smelled nothing. It was spent. I crushed it in my hand, let the dust fall. A small, clean moment. Gone before it meant anything. And then I heard it again. Laughter. Not hers. Not mine. A group of men down the road. One had a lute. The others clapped in rhythm, singing something vulgar. Loud, free. They didn't care how they smelled. They didn't care how they looked. I stood, didn't join them, didn't approach, but I let the sound follow me as I walked. A reminder. You can still laugh, even when you stink of meat and regret, even when your breath could kill roses, even when the only woman who smiled at you nearly vomited trying to be polite. I'd worn these clothes like armour, wool tunic, worn through hose, threadbare cloak tied at the collar with a bit of rusted wire, layers not meant for fashion or even warmth, but for hiding, for concealing the sweat, the rot, the mistakes of the day. They weren't clean, hadn't been in weeks, but they were familiar, and in this city, familiarity is safety, until it isn't. I first noticed the betrayal when I sat down by the dye cart to rest. The heat from the boiling vats licked through the open stall like steam from a hungry mouth. It curled up beneath my cloak, found the moisture in my shirt and started cooking it. It didn't smell like wool anymore. It smelled like soup. The sweat that had soaked in all morning was rising now, steamed out of the fabric, condensed around my neck and under my arms. The herbs Goethe gave me couldn't mask it. Nothing could. I stood, and something peeled off my back. My shirt, wet, suctioned to my spine. My boots squished faintly with every step. Not from puddles, those had dried hours ago. This was from within. The leather had absorbed everything I'd walked through and was now slowly releasing it in time with my gait. Step, stink, step, stink. The cloak didn't flap in the wind anymore. It clung, heavy with smoke, blood, grease from the butcher's stall, dust from the alleys, ash from the tanneries, and something sweet, rotten sweet, like an apple forgotten in the sun. That one was from earlier, when I passed the stall and brushed against the hanging fruit. It had split open against my hip. I didn't notice until now. The sugar had mixed with the wool, fermenting. I caught another whiff and gagged. Not from my mouth this time, from my sleeves. I pulled the cloak tighter, hoping to contain it. Bad idea. The heat doubled. Sweat bloomed under my arms like fungus. My shirt stuck to my ribs. My back itched. I scratched and came away with something. Under my nails that wasn't skin. I needed to change. But I didn't have another set. The laundry cart near the southern gate took wash for coin. I'd passed it earlier, a woman with one eye and two children squatting in a pile of mildewed linen. She wouldn't take me, though, not without money, and definitely not with whatever I was wearing now. You can't wash what's already become its own species. I ducked into a side alley, hoping for shade. Instead, I found a midden heap. Rotten cabbage, bones, something black and buzzing, a broken boot with a toe still in it. But it was cooler. I crouched behind a crate and pulled the tunic over my head. The smell hit me like a slap. It was worse than the alley, worse than the meat, worse than the blood in my mouth. It was mine, trapped inside the cloth, layered over days, soaked into the weave. Sweat, spit, smoke, meat grease, chamber pot splashback, tallow from candles, rat droppings, a smear of someone else's blood from the barber surgeon's chair. And now apple syrup slowly turning to wine. I wanted to burn it. I didn't have fire, so I sat, half dressed, half dying. I wiped my face with the dry part of the sleeve. Didn't help. The stink was skin deep now. No, deeper. After a few minutes, I forced the tunic back on. It clung. The collar rubbed raw against the scab, forming where the pliers had pressed into my cheek. The armpits pinched. I tried to pull the fabric loose from my chest. It clung tighter, like it resented the gesture. The stink swirled again. Boiled grave with top notes of spoiled barley and despair. I stood. The crate I'd sat on left a wet mark on my trousers. I didn't look. I walked fast now. Movement was the only thing that helped. Not because it improved the smell, but because it gave people less time to notice. A merchant near the chapel shouted, "Socks! Fresh wool! No holes!" I stopped. He held up a pair of mismatched foot wraps, both grey with age. "How much?" I asked. 5 coppers, I laughed. "You'll die with those still on the rack." "Better than dying with what you've got on," he said, sniffing. I moved on. A woman pinched her nose as I passed. Her child said, "Mum, what's that smell?" She shushed him. I didn't look back. Near the edge of the tanner's quarter, I ducked into a covered stoop and ripped open the bundle from Goethe again. The crushed herbs were nearly gone, but a single waxed leaf remained. I rubbed it on my neck. It made the stink worse, layered sweet onto sick, like perfume at a funeral, like painting over mould. I gave up. By the time I reached the old inn where I sometimes squatted for rest, I could feel the fabric stiffening. My tunic had begun to dry from the sun, but the stink had crystallized. Each move released a fresh wave. My knees itched, my spine burned. I scratched, and something flaked off. It wasn't dirt, not anymore. It was me, becoming part of the cloth, or the cloth becoming part of me. I wasn't sure which was worse. Inside the inn, I found an empty stool near the fire. No one sat near me. One man moved when I did. I leaned on the table. The barkeep nodded toward me. "Yo, you can stay," he said, "but keep your arms down." "I'm not raising them," I said. "Good," he muttered. I sat for a while, still, sizzling slightly. I thought about taking the shirt off again, throwing it into the fire, watching it writhe, but I didn't, because then I'd have nothing, and nothing is colder than being bare in a world this full of filth. So I sat, in my clothes, my betrayers, my skin, and I waited for the next hour, the next insult, the next reason to keep moving, because if I stopped, the stink might finally settle in my lungs and decide to stay. Permanently. There's a silence in filth, an agreement. You stink. I stink. We don't talk about it. But when you break the pact, when you try to rise above it, the city notices, it smells the betrayal, and it doesn't forgive. I was halfway between desperation and delirium when I heard the hiss. Steam, low and steady, drifting from a slit in the wall near Southwick Alley. Not smoke, not sewer fog. This was warmer, thicker, almost sweet. The bathhouse. It whispered like a lover. Come inside, just for a moment. Get clean. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stopped, turned toward the fog. The stone steps were wet. The wooden sign above the door sagged, letters half rotted, but still legible. Bathe and be blessed. Lies. But the itch under my skin was worse than the fear in my gut. Inside, the air hit me like bread just pulled from the oven, wet, heavy, and full of things rising. It wrapped around my arms, softened the crusted sweat along my ribs. My boots sank slightly into the reed mats. I didn't know if it was from water or something else. A woman behind a counter looked up, no expression. "Wash or soak?" she asked. "What's the difference?" "One you remember." I pulled out my last copper. She slid a thin token across the wood. It was slick with something that wasn't oil. "Third room on the left. Don't talk to the twins." I didn't ask. I just nodded. The corridor was narrow. Steam clung to the walls like skin. Every door pulsed with the sound of movement. Sloshing, muttering, the low groans of joints cracking under heat. The third door opened on its own. Inside, the room glowed. A single lantern swung from the ceiling beam, haloed in mist. The tub in the centre was stone, blackened at the rim from years of use. A wooden bench sat against the far wall, a shelf with small cloths, a bar of something that might have once been soap. I stepped in, closed the door. Silence, almost holy. I peel. Ed off my tunic. It clung even now, making a wet tearing sound as it left my skin. The stink didn't leave with it. It got worse. Exposed, concentrated, it came out like breath from a wound. I dropped it in the corner, trying not to touch it more than necessary. My hose followed. My cloak. My everything. Naked now, I stepped into the tub. The water wasn't hot. It was warm the way blood is warm. Familiar, intimate, wrong. I lowered myself slowly. It stung immediately. My thighs burned, my back prickled, my jaw where the tooth had been throbbed again like it wanted to remember. I sank to my chin. The water turned cloudy around me. Not from soap, from me. I didn't move at first, just sat, let it work, let it pull the city off me, or deeper in. I reached for the cloth, dipped it, rubbed. It foamed slightly, enough to pretend. I started at my hands. Black came off in strings, then my arms, elbows, armpits, ribs, stomach. Everything was worse than I thought. Layers of grit sloughed away. My skin under it was pale, almost tender. It didn't look like it belonged to me. I rubbed harder. Chest, back, neck. When I got to my face, I winced. The jaw ached. The cheekbone was bruised. I rubbed anyway. Something cracked near the corner of my lip, dried blood splitting. I tasted iron again, swallowed it. There was movement outside the door. A whisper. Two voices, low, syncopated. I froze. They passed. The twins? I didn't ask, didn't want to know. By the time I stood, the water was nearly black, not dark. Black. I stepped out dripping. No towel, just the air. It bit me. Despite the warmth, I shivered. The cloth I'd used floated, heavy and folded like a drowned tongue. I dressed slowly. The tunic went back on like a lie, lighter now, still stained, still mine, but softer. The cloak didn't smell as bad, maybe because I did. Maybe because the water had taken something I couldn't name. I stepped back into the corridor. The woman at the counter didn't look up. "You'll feel it tonight," she said. "Feel what?" "Being clean." Outside, the city recoiled. I didn't see it. I felt it. People turned faster when I walked by. Some stared, some sniffed. One man spat near my boots. Clean was a threat. Clean meant guilt. Clean meant you were hiding something. Why would anyone get clean unless they had something to wash off? By the time I reached the square, the clouds had thickened. The wind picked up. My skin felt raw. The shirt no longer protected. It scratched. Like wearing judgment. Like wrapping yourself in regret. I passed the fish stall. The vendor looked at me, then looked again. "You sick?" he asked. "No?" "Sure smells like you're trying to be." Back at the edge of the alley, I paused. A puddle reflected me, paler, thinner, different. I wasn't clean, I was exposed. The bath had stripped the grime, but underneath I was still me, still hungry, still limping, still stinking inside. And as I turned toward the place I sometimes called home, the sky opened up. Rain, fat, slow, warm. It hit the city like applause. Stirred everything, every alley, every gutter. The bath hadn't saved me. It had just made me more absorbent. The bar of soap was small, pale, smelled like flowers that had never seen dirt. I found it wrapped in a bit of cloth tucked into the bottom of my cloak, something the bathhouse woman must have slipped in when I wasn't looking, or maybe I paid for it. I didn't remember. Either way, it was mine now, and it didn't belong in this city. Not really. The smell of it rose even through the wool, sweet, crisp, sharp like spring against the rotten milk of everything else I wore. It didn't cover anything, just layered over it. Loud, wrong, suspicious. I tucked it deeper into my pocket and kept walking, pretending I didn't notice people noticing me, because they were. Their noses twitched before their eyes did. Their stares weren't curious, they were careful, accusatory, like I'd broken something sacred. You don't get clean in this place, not unless you're hiding a crime or preparing for death. There is no in-between. A boy stepped into my path, sniffed, wrinkled his face. "You smell like flowers." He said it like a curse. I kept moving. The rain had stopped. The stones were slick. Every step let out a faint squeal from my boots, like they resented the water. I pulled my hood down farther. Didn't help. The smell clung. A ghost trailing behind me. I reached the edge of South Alley, near the baker's kiln. Warmth bled into the air. Bread baked in a cracked stone oven sent out that familiar yeasty breath that made the rats sleep deeper in the corners. I ducked behind the stall. No one was watching, or maybe they were. I didn't care. I pulled out the soap, unwrapped it, held it in my palm like something stolen. Even dry, it reeked of defiance, of violets, of lies. I found a bucket near the butcher's cart, brackish water, probably leftover rinse for tools or hands. I dunked the soap and rubbed it between my palms. It foamed, actual foam, white and light, like snowmelt. The feeling was such a strange, not smooth, squeaky, like the soap wanted to leave me faster than I could wash. I scrubbed my hands first, then my wrists, my forearms. The scent bloomed stronger. I moved to my neck, behind my ears, my face. The soap caught in the cracks, found the bruised gum where my tooth had been pulled. It stung, like it was asking questions. Who are you trying to be? What are you hiding? I scrubbed harder, my scalp, my chest beneath the tunic, slipping the cloth aside. My fingers were red now, scraped raw. Someone coughed behind me. I turned. A woman stared, holding a loaf in one hand, a child in the other. She didn't speak. She just stared at the bar of soap like it had confessed something about me she already suspected. Then another man walked by, caught the scent, turned his head. His lip curled. "Who are you trying to impress?" he muttered. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. They weren't asking questions. They were naming charges. I wrapped the soap quickly, tucked it deep. I moved through the next street like I was bleeding something bright. The cleaner I smelled, the more foul the city became. Not because it changed, because I no longer belonged to it. Every sewer-grated breeze hit me like a brick. Every alley felt darker. Every puddle threatened to reclaim me. The soap had marked me. It said, "This one is not like you. This one has tried to forget." I ducked into an alcove behind the gravedigger's chapel, a dry patch where beggars sometimes slept. Empty now, the rain had scared them off. I sat, took off my boots. They reeked. No surprise, still waterlogged, still oozing old things. I rinsed them with a splash from a runoff pipe and laid them on their sides. The soap stayed in my hand. I looked at it again. It had no cracks, no bite marks, no proof it had been used, even though I'd scrubbed hard enough to open skin. It was too good for this place, too good for me. I almost threw it. Almost. But I didn't. Because even guilt has value. I placed it in a rag and tied it shut, slid it under the lining of my coat where the stitching had started to split. If someone found it, they'd steal it. If they didn't, I'd use it again. When the itch returned, when the stink swallowed me again, which it would, which it always did. Back on the road, the scent began to fade. My skin, raw and scrubbed, dried faster in the wind. It flaked. Underneath the flake was no redemption, just more of me. A girl passed. "Did you fall in perfume?" she asked. I didn't answer. Behind me, someone spat, and then someone else said, "I bet he thinks he's better than us." They were right. For a moment I did, and that's the real curse of soap. Not the judgment, not the smell. The reminder that once you weren't filthy, that once you might have believed in clean. There are crimes in this city. Stealing bread, breaking bones, spilling blood in the wrong direction. And then there's the other crime, the one no one speaks aloud but everyone smells, cleanliness. I didn't see it at first. I felt it. The air didn't change. The people did. I passed the fruit vendor and she stiffened. Didn't look me in the eye. Just adjusted her apron and stepped 1 inch back, as if I'd sneezed into her soul. The next stall down, a man selling cracked knives paused mid-haggle. He stared, not at my hands, not at my face, at the space around me, like the air itself was giving me away. Too clean, too smooth, too unearned. I turned the corner toward Crook Alley, boots squelching slightly from earlier rain. My coat fluttered in the breeze. For once, it didn't smell like a butcher's apron, and that made them look hard. 3 boys playing with a wheel and stick paused. One whispered, another laughed. The third, barefoot, muddy from toes to ribs, just pointed. "Mister's too clean," he said, loud enough for half the block. I kept walking, faster now. Not panicked. Not yet, just aware. I cut through the market's eastern edge, where the stalls thinned and the space widened. Fewer eyes, fewer noses, but those that remained were sharper. A beggar looked up from his corner, sniffed once and muttered, "Wrong kind of sin." I didn't stop, didn't speak. He wasn't wrong. Clean in this place means one of 2 things. You've done something wicked you want to wash off, or you're about to die and want to meet whatever waits with your face wiped. I was neither. But try explaining that with your skin freshly scrubbed and your sleeves not stiff with grease. Near the tannery wall, a man leaned against a barrel, cloth tied over his nose. Not for the stench. Everyone there had long gone nose-blind, but for the flies. He saw me, straightened. "Bathhouse rat," he said, not angry. "Just labelling." I nodded, kept walking. He spat. It landed near my boots, thick and yellow. "Heretic," he added, louder this time. That one stung, not because I cared, because others heard it. From that moment on, the word travelled. I saw it pass from mouth to mouth. Heretic, clean, suspicious. No one chased me, but they didn't need to. The city itself was changing shape around me, edges curling inward, corners drawing close. It wasn't angry yet, but it was interested. That's worse. At the fishmonger's stall, someone slipped a bit of refuse behind me. Rotting fin, maybe gill. It hit my cloak and stuck. The man who threw it grinned, no teeth. "Smell like nothing," he said. "Fix that." He walked on. I let the fish piece fall to the mud. Didn't clean it off, didn't need more attention. But the spot where it hit still itched, like shame rubbed into fabric. By the time I reached the slum edge, I was sweating again. Not from heat, from pressure. I passed a water cart. The man pulling it leaned over the rim and said, "You'll need more than that little bath to make it through tonight." I didn't answer. He was right. The bath had done more than wash me. It had peeled something off me, something invisible. Now I walked too light. Now I moved like someone without guilt. And in a place like this, that's the worst kind of offence. A child followed me for a while, 10, maybe 11, bare feet, straw in his hair, eyes too old. He didn't beg, didn't ask questions. He just sniffed every few steps and said, "You don't belong here." Over and over, like a prayer. I ducked into an alley to lose him. He didn't follow, but his words did. By mid-afternoon I was back near the square. It looked different now, smaller, more watchful. The crowd pressed tighter, not with bodies but with breath. Every person I passed took me in like a priest at confession. I heard murmurs. Bathhouse. Foreign? No, worse. Thinks he's better. I passed the same butcher from earlier. He looked me up and down. "I thought you were hungry," he said. I was. "Now you stink of roses." "It's soap." Same thing. I cut back toward the inn, looking for shade. As I turned the corner, I felt something hit my back. Not hard. Soft. Wet. I didn't have to look. Fruit. Half rotten. Someone laughed. Not cruelly, just knowingly. They weren't punishing me. They were reminding me. This city doesn't like balance disrupted. Too clean and you're unnatural. Too dirty and you're invisible. I'd tipped the scale. Now it was pushing back. Inside the inn, the barkeep saw me. He didn't speak, just gestured toward the far corner. Out of sight, away from the fire. I took the seat, sat, waited. Felt the soap under my coat. It didn't smell like flowers anymore. It smelled like consequence. I scratched my arm. The skin flaked again. Underneath was nothing new, just me, but rawer, more visible. The cost of clean isn't pain, it's attention, and I was running out of places to hide. I didn't want to eat, not because I wasn't hungry, I was. The kind of hunger that settles low and slow, aching, not urgent, but constant, like a dull tooth too scared to rot completely. I didn't want to eat because I didn't want to be seen eating, not today, not this clean. But hunger doesn't care about timing or dignity, it just waits, pressing, reminding, tightening your stomach like a belt cinched from the inside. So I went to the food cart at the edge of Mud Lane. No sign, just a plank of wood stretched between two barrels, a basket of bread hunched beside a rusted bowl of pickled something. Cabbage, maybe, or onions, or egg. Hard to say what it started as. It didn't want to be identified, just swallowed. The woman behind the cart was older than most stonework, bent at the hip, eyes like black beads, face folded tight around a single gold tooth that looked more like a warning than a smile. "1 copper," she said, holding up half a round of bread and a dripping ladle of the pickled mess. "I've got half." She stared at me, then stared longer, maybe at the soap smell still clinging to me, or the blood dried at my collarbone, or the crust of something sweet where the fruit hit me earlier. She sniffed once, then grunted, "Fine." She handed me the meal like she was handing me my own name scratched off a ledger. I walked down the alley to a cracked bench with just enough dry surface to sit on, just enough shadow to pretend I was invisible. I took a bite of the bread. Hard, not stale, fossilized. I let it soak in my spit, chewing slow until my jaw clicked. Then I scooped up the pickled whatever it was. It wobbled on the wood, slid a little before settling. I stared. Grey-green, purple threads, a slice of something that might have once been a root, or flesh, or both. I spooned it into my mouth, chewed. Salt hit first, then sour, then a kind of burnt tang, like it had fermented somewhere unfortunate. I swallowed it anyway, because survival has a flavour, and it's not good. A shadow moved beside me. I didn't look up at first, just took another bite. Then the voice came. "You eat like someone who regrets being alive." It was a man, tall, scar along his jaw, hair pulled back with a leather tie that had once been part of someone else's belt. He didn't sit, just hovered. "I eat like someone who can't afford to be dead," I said. He grinned. "Fair." He squatted on his heels across from me, pulled something from his pocket, a bit of dried meat wrapped in cloth. He didn't eat it, just held it. "Bathhouse?" I didn't answer. "Thought so," he said. "You still smell too good for this place. I'm fixing it." "Not fast enough." He tore the meat in half and tossed one to me. I didn't catch it, let it fall, didn't trust it, didn't trust him. He didn't seem offended. "Suit yourself," he said. "Just thought someone eating pickled regret might want an upgrade." He stood, wiped his hands on his trousers, walked off, left the meat behind. I stared at it, still didn't touch it. Finished the bread. Every bite scraped my throat like stone. The pickled stuff was gone, but the taste lingered. I could feel it trying to argue with the herbs Goethe had given me earlier. They were losing. I picked up the meat, tossed it into the gutter. A rat emerged within seconds, sniffed, dragged it away. It didn't look back. Back on the main street, the crowd was heavier now. Lunch rush, everyone eating, everyone watching. Vendors barked prices. Fish sizzled over low flames, soup steamed in cracked pots. The air was thick with hunger and judgment. I passed a man gnawing on a bone. He stared at me like I'd stolen something from his plate. The fruit woman from earlier saw me. "Better?" she asked. "Worse," I said. She smiled. That same tight-lipped, half-kind smile the city wears when it's not sure whether it wants you alive or just slowly rotting. A child followed me again, not the same one, smaller, dirtier, holding a crust of bread and a stick like a sword. "You look sick," he said. "I'm fine." "You smell like flowers and pickles." "I'm fine," I said again. He laughed, ran off. I watched him disappear into the press of people. He didn't look back. I found a quiet corner behind the stables, sat on a barrel, let the food settle, or fight. It churned, groaned, threatened. My gut was louder than the street now, but I held it in, because throwing up meant wasting what little I'd won, and I hadn't won much. A bell rang from the tower, one chime, midday passing, half the day still ahead, half the city still left to offend. My hand still smelled like soap, my mouth like vinegar and bile, my stomach like a war between ghosts, and my eyes kept watering, not from emotion, from whatever was in that pickled mess, maybe acid, maybe truth. Either way, I wouldn't forget it, but I'd pretend I had, because that's what you do. You eat, you survive, you walk away, even when the taste won't. He was barefoot in a puddle that hissed. I heard the sound before I saw him. That sharp sizzle of water, too unnatural to be just rain, maybe piss, maybe blood, maybe something boiling up from the gutters themselves, but the kid didn't care. He stomped once, laughed, stomped again, splash, hiss, cackle. I turned the corner and saw him in the middle of Gutter Bend Lane, bare legs, thin as broom handles, shirt too big, sleeves rolled up past his elbows, no shoes, no belt, just a rag tied around his waist like a sash, proud as a prince. He saw me, didn't flinch, didn't pause, just pointed at the puddle like it was treasure. "You ever hear water burn?" he said. "It's not water," I said. He grinned. "Then I win." He stomped again. The puddle spit steam. I approached slowly, not because I feared him, but because I feared whatever the hell he was standing in. "Where are your shoes?" I asked. He looked down like the question surprised him. "Dunno," he said. "Left foot got bored. Right foot ran off to find it." "Where's your mother?" He jerked his thumb toward the tavern down the lane. "She's visiting a barrel." Then he ran. Not out of fear, not out of shame. He just bolted. Down the alley, across the stones, over crates and trash heaps like it was all part of his world, and I was the alien. I stood there, alone with the puddle, which still sizzled faintly in the heat of the sun. I moved on. Didn't know why that moment stuck. Maybe it was the way he laughed. Like nothing in the city could touch him. Like the rot hadn't claimed him yet. Or maybe it was because I couldn't remember the last time I laughed like that, unafraid, unfiltered, barefoot in something that could kill me and not caring. I followed the path he ran, half expecting to find him again, but he was gone. The tavern he pointed to stood crooked at the end of the lane, its shutters open, door half swinging like a D. Runk's jaw, no sign, just the smell, sour ale and old breath. Inside, a handful of people nursed cups and wounds. The barkeep leaned on the counter like he was trying to hold up the building with his belly. In the corner, a woman slumped over a table, face down, red hair streaked with grease, arm dangling, fingers twitching slightly. I walked in, slow, not quiet. No one looked up, not even her. I stopped beside her and said, "You missing a boy?" Her hand rose, waved vaguely at the air. "I'm missing everything," she said, voice like sandpaper and ash. "I think he's walking through puddles that could burn holes in brick." "Good for him," she said. "Tell him to find his father while he's at it." "I don't know him." She laughed into the table. "Neither do I." I left her there. Didn't say another word. Some stories don't have middles, just beginnings and ends that forget each other. Back outside, the sun was at its highest. No shade, no wind. The heat made the streets bleed. The puddles from the rain steamed now, lifting the city's stink into the air like incense made from trash. The kid was still gone. I stood for a minute, trying to decide which direction meant survival. Behind me, the woman with the barrel. Ahead, streets I hadn't stepped in yet. I turned forward. A dog barked somewhere up the lane, a real bark, sharp and full of warning, then silence. A group of boys rounded the corner, older than the puddle kid. Teens, hard eyes. One held a length of chain, another a slingshot. They looked at me, didn't speak. I nodded, kept moving, didn't give them a reason. They moved past. One spat, not at me, just near, territory marked. I found a step near a locked-up shop and sat. The sweat had dried on my neck. The soap was long gone now, replaced by the smell of old food and worse thoughts. I pulled out the last crumb of bread from my coat pocket, flaked, crushed, but still food. I ate it without tasting. My fingers itched. I scratched. The skin peeled. Underneath, red, raw, me. Still here. The kid came back just before dusk. I was still sitting. He rounded the corner, holding something in his hand. A fish head, fresh, eyes cloudy, mouth open. He waved it like a prize. "Found it," he said. "Where?" "In the street. Someone dropped it." "What are you going to do with it?" He shrugged. "Show Mum. Maybe she'll cook it, or wear it." "You always barefoot?" He looked down. "Shoes make you slow." "You eat today?" Sort of. Sort of. Chewed on a candle? Didn't like it. "Then why?" "Wanted to know if it tasted like light." He sat beside me, fish head in lap. Didn't speak, just sat. We listened to the city breathe. Dogs barked, chickens clucked like someone had insulted their ancestry. Somewhere a fight started. The kid looked over at me. "You ever kill anyone?" "No." "Ever want to?" "Sometimes." He nodded like that made sense, then stood, fish head still swinging. "See you," he said, and ran again. Not away, just on. I watched him disappear, shoeless, weightless, half mad, completely free. And I wondered, for the first time all day, if he had it right. Because if you can laugh in a city this cruel, barefoot in boiling puddles, you might just be the only sane one left. Word count 1,507. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 17, The Tavern's Roaring Pit, where you follow your hunger and the scent of something roasted into a place where voices clash louder than fists and trust runs thinner than the ale. You said, continue with next chapter. The tavern's roaring pit inside was smoke, bodies and breath thick enough to drink. I drank something that bit back and liked it anyway. There should be no nonsense, no repetition, should be interesting. Keep old chapter in mind and continue the story. Make sure our story is narrated as me. Each chapter should be 1,500 each. ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here is Chapter 17, The Tavern's Roaring Pit. The city's heat pulls you back inside, but this time into its belly. A tavern teetering between comfort and chaos. The food, the drink, the people, they all bite, and you don't just swallow it, you become part of it. As always, this continues directly from the last chapter. It's immersive, second person, with no repetition and no wasted breath. I pushed open the door and stepped into the raw. Smoke, ale, sweat, and roasted fat hit me like a wave. The heat inside the tavern was wetter than the outside air. It clung to the back of my neck, my ribs, the insides of my knees. It tasted like breath someone else had already used. The door slammed shut behind me and the sound vanished. All that remained was the thrum, voices overlapping, tankards thudding, laughter too sharp to be friendly, chairs scraping, dice rattling like bones. It was a pit, not a room. The light came from oil lamps hanging low from soot-blackened beams. Shadows stretched like drunks reaching for something they couldn't afford. The smoke didn't rise, it hovered at mouth level, a layer of smog you had to drink before you drank anything else. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. The tavern was full. Bodies pressed into every corner, some standing, some seated, all loud. At the far end, behind a bar worn down to splinters, the barkeep poured something thick from a clay jug into a chipped tin cup. He handed it to a man missing an ear. The man sniffed it, grimaced, and drank. I stepped forward, trying not to brush too close to anyone. Didn't work. A woman's elbow grazed my side. Her dress was damp from shoulder to hem. She didn't notice. A man passed carrying a tray of meat. Burned, blackened edges. It smelled like desperation dressed in pepper. My stomach growled. It wasn't asking. It was demanding. I reached the bar and waited. The barkeep noticed me, or smelled me. "You need something, stranger?" "Something that hurts," I said. He grinned. "We've got that." He pulled a bottle from under the counter. No label. The glass was dark and sticky. He uncorked it and poured a shot's worth into a cup that hadn't been cleaned since the last king died. I picked it up, held it to the light. The liquid inside was red-brown, thick as cough, and steaming slightly. I drank. It bit back immediately. A fire lit in my throat. Not just heat, texture. It felt like drinking vinegar that had been boiled with a rusted nail. I coughed, laughed once, then nodded. "Another?" "Yeah," he poured. 2 drinks in, and the room changed shape. The smoke curled friendlier. The voices blurred. The shadows stopped reaching. My gut unclenched, just enough for me to breathe without tasting fear. A stool opened at the far end of the bar. I took it. A man sat beside me. No teeth, no hair. Fingers stained with ink or blood or both. He looked sideways and said, "That your first cup here?" "Third." "Still standing, not bad." "What's in it?" He shrugged. "Depends on who's brewing. Could be beetroot and brandy. Could be blood and boot polish." I didn't ask which I'd had. Didn't matter. A fight broke out near the door. Not big. Just two men disagreeing loudly with fists. One hit the other with a chair. The other bled from the ear and smiled. No one stopped them. No one looked. They weren't interrupting anything. They were part of the rhythm. I drank again. The cup was empty too fast. A bowl slid in front of me. Thick soup, chunks of meat, maybe. Something floating that might have been a potato or a toe. I looked up. The barkeep nodded. "You look hungry." "I am." "On the house." "Why?" He leaned in close. "You smell like you're trying to be better than this place. That's dangerous. Might as well eat something real before it kills you." "Fair enough." I picked up the spoon. The soup was hot but not warm. The kind of heat that hides something deeper. The kind that's meant to cover a flavour, not enhance it. I took a bite. Chewed slow. The meat was chewy, gamey, not fresh, not spoiled, suspended somewhere in between life and legend. The broth was thick, salty, and sweet. I didn't want to ask why. I ate anyway. A man across from me raised his glass. "To the filth that keeps us honest," he shouted. The room cheered. I raised mine too. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The drink spoke for me. So did the sweat now running down my back. I lost track of time. Might have been an hour. Might have been 3. But eventually the noise settled. Not quiet, just lower, like the tavern was catching its breath between rounds. I stood to leave. The barkeep leaned over. "Take the cup," he said. "Why?" "So you don't forget where you've been." I pocketed it, felt its warmth through my coat. Outside, the night had started to fall. The air was colder now, cleaner. I wiped my mouth with my sleeve, tasted smoke and spice and metal. Something moved in my belly, not hunger, not sickness, just the city, settling in. I didn't hear the whole joke, just the punchline, something about a priest, a goat, and the wrong end of a confession. It hit me sideways. I laughed, too loud, too sudden. It cracked out of me like a cough, all throat and teeth, and echoed through the haze like glass breaking. My eyes watered immediately, either from the laughter or the smoke or the drink, or maybe just from the release. I didn't care, until the silence hit. The room didn't go quiet, not all at once. It just slowed. One voice dropped, then another, then boots stopped tapping, cups stopped rising, heads turned, and there I was, leaning on the bar, eyes leaking, grinning like a man who forgot where he was. I blinked, cleared my throat, set the cup down too carefully, like that would fix anything. It didn't. The bartender didn't say a word. No one did, just looks. That heavy quiet that makes noise feel like a crime. I sat straighter, too straight. The man beside me coughed once, loud, then turned away. The woman across the room shook her head and muttered something I couldn't catch. Someone else whispered, "Drunks gone soft." They weren't wrong. For a second I had let something slip, something warm and human and out of place. And now the tavern wanted it back. I stayed quiet after that. Didn't move, didn't drink. Just stared at the bar's wooden grain and let the moment fade. It didn't. It just thinned. Like smoke. Present, but ignored. 10 minutes later, things picked up again. Dice hit the table. A chair scraped across stone. A man near the door belched. Life resumed. But it wasn't the same. Now they knew me. Not the me I meant to be. The real one. The one that laughed too loud, too bright, too open. I left not long after, not in shame, not in fear, in awareness, like stepping away from a fire that burned hotter than comfort. The door stuck as I opened it, let out a breath when it finally gave. Oh. Outside, the air hit colder than I remembered. Night had thickened. The wind picked up the scent of stew and ash and old leather. It curled into my coat, found my neck, settled behind my ears like a whisper. The streets were mostly empty now, just a few stragglers. One man sleeping upright against a wall, head back, mouth open. 2 women arguing over something in a cloth sack. One cart rolling slow, wheels moaning with every turn. I walked, nowhere in particular. Not back to the inn, not toward the bathhouse. Just away. I rubbed my eyes, still wet, still stinging. The wind made them worse. They weren't tears, not really. Just salt pushed out of me by noise and ale, and the shock of hearing myself laugh like I meant it. I passed the square, empty now, stalls shuttered, trash drifting like leaves. One rat bold enough to walk across the cobbles in plain sight. He paused when he saw me, didn't run. I stepped over him, didn't speak. The city was quieter now, not asleep, just waiting. It never really sleeps. It just leans back, letting the cold do its work. I stopped beneath the ruined bell tower. the one with the broken clock. It had been frozen at dusk for as long as anyone remembered. No one ever fixed it, no one ever tried. Time didn't matter here, only rhythm, only stink and breath and the next bite. I leaned against the stone, let the cold seep into my coat. I still smelled like smoke and soap, and maybe a bit of joy, the kind that doesn't belong, the kind that marks you, the kind that gets you watched. Behind me, a door creaked. A woman stepped out, bucket in hand. She paused, looked at me, not hostile, not warm, just tired. "You laughing out here?" she asked. "No," I said. "Good," she muttered. "Ain't nothing funny." She dumped the bucket into the gutter. The splash reached my boot. She didn't apologize, just went back inside. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening, thinking, remembering how that laugh had felt in my chest, hot, sharp, too real. I missed it already, but I wouldn't do it again. Not like that, not here. When I finally turned back toward the alley, the city felt tighter, narrower, like it had moved in a few inches closer, smelled stronger, watched harder, heard better. The laugh had marked me, and now it waited. I smelled him before I saw him. Not soap, not sweat, not rot. Fruit. Not the kind you find fermenting in the gutter, buzzing with flies. The expensive kind, imported, steeped in oils, dabbed on wrists, poured into wine that never sees a chipped cup. He was drenched in it. Roses, wine, orange peel maybe. His perfume cut through the alley like a hot knife through congealed soup. I gagged before he reached me. Not because it was foul, because it was dishonest. That smell didn't belong here. It didn't belong anywhere near stones stained with urine and blood. It didn't belong in the breathless, narrow air between slaughterhouse and tannery. It didn't belong with people like me. But there he was, wrapped in velvet. A coat the colour of fresh bruises, deep purple, trimmed with silver thread so fine it caught the streetlight like dew. His boots were polished so clean I could see my own filth in them. His gloves looked like they cost more than 3 months of bread. And people moved for him. They stepped aside without being told, like leaves parting for a wind. Some bowed, some just lowered their eyes. No one spoke. I didn't move. I wanted to, but my boots felt stuck. Or maybe I just wanted him to see me. He didn't look at me, not directly, but as he passed, his nostrils twitched, once, and he grimaced, like I'd farted truth in his curated little breeze. He walked slower after that, as if the very air had offended him. And in a way, it had. Because this wasn't his world, he just owned it. He had guards, 3 of them, uniformed, black cloaks with bronze fastenings shaped like wolves, swords that had never been drawn but polished daily, eyes that scanned without blinking. The lead one glanced at me as they passed, just once, no warning, no threat. But that look said everything. You breathe wrong, and you're meat. I breathed anyway, shallow, through my teeth. The perfume thick, keened in their wake, clinging to the stones, lingering like a lie. I stepped back into the shadow of a doorway, let them pass, and I watched, because you don't turn your back on wolves. They disappeared around the corner. The alley sighed, like it had been holding something in. And then the street returned to itself. Cracked stone, gutter flies, smoke, and the usual mix of stink and murmurs. 2 men who'd bowed straightened their backs. A woman spat. A kid picked up something the noble had dropped. A handkerchief, maybe. Silk, red, too bright for this place. He smelled it, then wiped his nose. I watched him pocket it. Part of me wanted to stop him. The smarter part didn't. Let the fruit rot someone else. I kept walking. My boots dragged now. Everything about me felt heavier since he passed. Not dirtier, just revealed. He made the rest of us look like old paint peeling off a wall. Someone paid too much to ignore. And maybe that was the point. Money doesn't hide rot. It marinates it. I turned toward the western side of the square, past the well where the girls always pretended to draw clean water and the boys pretended not to drink it. The noble's scent had followed me, not literally, in memory. In contrast, my own coat now smelled worse in comparison, like meat stewed in guilt. I scratched under my collar. The itch had returned. My soap was long gone, and even if it weren't, I wouldn't touch it now, not after that man. He'd weaponized smell, used it to create space between him and the world. I didn't want to be mistaken for that. I stopped by a fire barrel near the market edge. 3 men stood around it. Didn't know them, didn't care. One nodded. I nodded back. The fire crackled. They didn't speak. Neither did I. The flames barely warmed my hands, but I needed them steady. After a few minutes, one of them said, "He passed through here. No name, no title. We all knew." "Yeah," I said. "He always come this far down?" "Don't think so. Wonder what he's looking for." "Not us." That got a grunt. Then silence again. Eventually I moved on. Back into the cold. I passed an alley where two men were arguing over a shoe. One shoe, no laces, no heel, just a shoe. They shoved each other like it was gold. I walked faster. By the time I reached my usual sleeping spot, under the sloped eave behind the shuttered butchers, I was exhausted, not tired, drained, like the noble's perfume had pulled something out of me. Pride, maybe, or just the illusion that I belonged here. I lay down on the stones, tried not to think, failed. All I could see was the man's face, smooth, shaven, untouched. No bite marks on his hands, no welts on his neck, no broken nails or chewed lips. He hadn't suffered, he hadn't worked, and yet he carried more weight than anyone here. Because of smell, because of silk, because the city let him. I closed my eyes. The scent still clung to my nose. Roses, citrus, wine, and something darker underneath. Not quite rot, but the promise of it. Waiting. Just beneath the velvet. I moved a little closer. The blood smelled faintly sweet. That meant he hadn't been dead long. I crouched, not to pray, just to look. His coat was thin, frayed at the cuffs. His boots had holes in the sides. Not old enough to be homeless, not clean enough to be missed. He looked like me. He looked like all of us. Except he was done now. The fishmonger dropped another fish onto the slab with a slap. "Buy something or back up," he said. I stood, wiped my hands on my coat. Didn't know why. It was reflex, the kind that keeps you from looking too long, the kind that keeps the stink from crawling deeper. A woman leaned near me, her voice low, sharp. Saw him walking strange earlier. Drunk? Drained. She moved on. Didn't want to be caught speculating. Another man stepped over the body. Didn't stop. Didn't even glance down. His boots smudged the blood. The stain widened. I stayed longer than I should have. Watching. Waiting for something that never came. Justice, outrage, a cart to take him away. Nothing. Eventually a dog wandered over, sniffed, sat, guarded, or waited for permission. I walked away. Not fast, not slow, just far enough to forget the shape of the man's face before it set in my memory like drying clay. But the image stuck anyway. The way his hand had been open, palm up, like he'd been asking. For what? Bread? Mercy? Breath? Further down the lane near the butcher's canopy, a man hawked salted ribs. He saw me coming, grinned and said, "You missed the show?" I was front row. "No refunds," he said, and laughed. I didn't. At the corner where the cobbler's shop leaned into the road like a drunk with secrets, I stopped and sat on the stoop, closed my eyes, tried to think of anything else. But the image returned. Not the blood, not the fall, the silence, the way the market absorbed him. 1 second he was a man, next second an obstacle, and soon not, even that. The city doesn't scream when someone dies. It hunches its shoulders, checks its pockets, keeps selling. I opened my eyes. The bread in my hand was gone. I didn't remember finishing it, didn't remember liking it. My stomach didn't feel full, my chest didn't feel steady. I scratched my neck, the skin flaked again. Still me, still here. But for how long? I thought about going back, to look again, to see if he was still there, to see if the dog had moved, to see if maybe someone had done something. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. By dusk, someone would drag him, roll him into a cart, toss him near the South Trench where the bones get lost in each other. Or maybe they'd leave him. Let the street clean him the way it cleans everything, slowly, without dignity, with rain and feet and time. I stood, shook off the cold. Not because it was cold, because the air felt sharp in a new way, like it had noticed me noticing, like it didn't appreciate it. I walked toward the well to rinse my hands. Not for cleanliness, just to do something. The water was cloudy, smelled faintly of iron. I dipped my fingers, scrubbed lightly, watched the swirl, red, rust, gone. Behind me, someone laughed, too loud, too clean. The market didn't like that either. I didn't go in looking for God. I went in looking for quiet. The kind that wraps around your head like cloth. The kind that presses just tight enough to muffle everything. The market, the blood, The memory of a man dying so quietly, nobody bothered to flinch. The church sat at the end of Wick Street, hunched between a tannery and a tax collector's post. Stone bones, wooden ribs, and stained glass eyes that had been cracked for so long the saints looked like they were crying. The door was open. That should have been my first warning. I stepped inside. The air hit me like breath from a mouth too old to close. Warm, wet, stagnant. Not incense, scented surrender. Smoke, mould, and the sick sweet rot of wax melting too close to its own wick. The place stank of faith left too long on the shelf. My boots clicked against the stone floor, a sound too sharp for the gloom. Pews stretched down either side, crooked like bad teeth. Each one carved with prayers no one answered anymore. The wood was sticky, not with blood, not with spit, with sweat, human, aged, and caked into the grain like secrets. I sat in the back, far from the pulpit, closer to the door, ready, always ready. The sermon was already underway. A man in layered robes stood at the front, eyes closed, hands raised like he was holding up a roof only he believed might fall. His voice carried, not booming, dripping, thick. It wasn't just words, it was humidity given sound. He spoke of sin, of hunger, of punishment, of reward, but only after death, and only if you died quietly. My shirt clung to my spine. I shifted. The pew creaked. The man beside me glanced without turning his head, a side eye as sharp as a blade. I stopped moving. The candles wept, long drips of wax sliding down iron holders and pooling on the stone like bones gone soft. The priest talked about mercy, then followed it with a story about a man who stole bread and was flayed alive. Everyone nodded, even the woman in the front row who looked like she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Mercy here was a word you whispered while sharpening a stick. The church grew hotter. I don't know how. The windows didn't open. The fire wasn't lit, but the air thickened. My breathing slowed just to save space. My hands dampened. The sweat didn't come from fear, it came from saturation. The room itself sweated. The walls, the benches, the God. I tried to focus on the altar. It was carved from blackwood, or something darker. A cross rose behind it, tall and splintered, draped in a cloth the colour of old blood. Beneath it, offerings. Bread, wilted flowers, a dead bird. One candle had burned so low it stuck to a fishbone. I didn't know if that was on purpose. Someone coughed behind me. Once. Then again. Then silence. I didn't turn. You don't turn in places like this. You stare forward and wait for the lies to end. The priest raised both hands again. The city is a crucible, he said. It burns the unworthy, it reveals the righteous, it cleanses the soul by boiling the body. Someone muttered, Amen. The rest followed, low, dragging, like pulling rope soaked in mud. I stood before it ended, didn't want the final prayer, didn't want the part where they all turned and looked at each other like any of them had changed. I walked out quiet. My boots softer this time, the air outside hit my face like cold water. I didn't know I'd been holding my breath. I stood just beyond the steps. Let the wind scrape the wax stink off my skin. Let the city smell me again. A man passed, saw me, pointed at the church. Get any answers? Got something, I said. He nodded. You still hungry? Always. Then that place failed you. He walked on. I didn't go back in. I turned left, past a girl drawing circles in the dirt with a stick, past a vendor boiling leather straps for broth, past a man sharpening knives he hadn't used yet. The sound of the sermon stuck in my ears like wax. Thick, slick, pointless. But it left a ring. A pulse, not spiritual, just pressure, like something was coming, something slow. Heavy, already breathing my air. The church bells rang once behind me. A cracked note. Too high. Too late. I had just left the church, lungs half full of incense and lies, when she found me. The air outside was no cleaner, but at least it moved. I was still blinking away the sting of candles and sweat when she stepped into my path. Didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me. Her robes were white, or had been once. They hung in folds, brown at the hems, crusted where the wrists met hands. A rope belt, a pouch, sandals tied with cords so thin they looked like threads spun from regret. A nun, or someone pretending. She was maybe 40, maybe older, but her eyes weren't tired, just expecting. "You look pale," she said. I opened my mouth to argue, then didn't, because I felt pale, hollow behind the eyes, like the sermon had drained something I didn't remember offering. "I'm fine," I lied. She nodded like I hadn't said anything useful, then reached into her pouch. Before I could back away, her hand was on my face. Her fingers were dry, her palm warm. She rubbed something along my brow, something thick, herbal, sticky. It smelled like crushed root, old honey, and sweat soaked in earth. It burned. I hissed through my teeth and tried to step back, but she held my chin gently in place with 2 fingers. "It's drawing out the heat," she said. "It's setting me on fire." She smiled. Like that was the correct reaction. I reached up to wipe it away, but she tapped my hand. "Let it sit." "I don't want to sit. You'll want to later." Her thumb traced under my cheekbone, once, firmly. It felt like being marked. Then she stepped back. "You're not sick," she said. "Not yet." "Then thank me." "For what?" "For slowing it down." She turned to go. "Wait." She paused. "What is it?" "Something my mother taught me, or my shadow, depends on the day." I stared. She walked away. The paste began to seep down my temples into the edge of my hairline. It pulsed against my skin like it had its own heartbeat. The smell grew stronger, medicinal, fermented. I turned the corner, trying to catch a breeze, but the city wasn't in the mood. I passed a barrel full of rainwater and leaned over it. Stared at my reflection. My forehead was red and streaked with green. I looked like a man who'd lost a fight with a garden. I splashed some water on it. The pain flared again, not sharp, not deep, just insistent, as if the skin itself was arguing. "You needed it," it seemed to say. "You won't thank her, but you will remember." Back in the lane, a man crossed the street when he saw me. I wasn't coughing, I wasn't bleeding, but I looked touched, and in this city, touched means dangerous. My steps slowed near the corner of Plague Alley. That's where I was heading next. I didn't want to go, but my legs did, like they already knew something I didn't. I scratched my temple. The paste had dried into a crust. I didn't scrape it off, not because I believed her, but because some part of me wanted to. That's how they get you, the ones who smile when it burns. It was just a sneeze. That was all. Short, wet, and unplanned. It echoed once, snapped off a wall like a whip crack, and silence followed hard behind it. I was 6 steps into Plague Alley when it happened. My boot had just hit the seam between 2 bricks slick with something green, and the air was thick with mildew and the sting of waste. And then, the sound. Sharp, human, wrong. A single sneeze. Too close, too real. The alley froze. Nobody said a word. Nobody pointed. Nobody ran, yet. They just paused, as if the entire street took one collective inhale and didn't know what to do with it. Then it began. Slow at first. The woman near the fish barrel stepped back. A man selling old boots turned and ducked behind his cart. A beggar in a corner clutched his blanket to his face and began to hum, soft and shaking. The alley cleared like fire had been thrown into it. Just one sound, one sneeze, and everyone moved like they'd smelled smoke and seen ash. I didn't breathe. Not at first. Not when the boy, because it was a boy, maybe 10 or 12, looked up, wide-eyed and red-nosed, wiping his sleeve across his face with a child's confusion. He didn't know the law, not the written one, the real one. Don't cough, don't bleed in public, and don't ever, ever sneeze in Plague Alley. He stood there, alone now, barefoot of course, shirt torn at the shoulder. He looked down at the space he had emptied, as if surprised that no one stood near him anymore. No one was yelling, no one had to. Their absence screamed louder than words. I still hadn't breathed. I could feel the burn rising behind my ribs. My body wanted to pull air in, wanted to trust that it was safe, but my mind knew better. In this city, breath is a gamble, a luxury, a confession, and I couldn't afford to confess anything. The boy looked at me. Only me. His eyes met mine, full of confusion, not guilt, just surprise. He didn't understand. Why his presence now hurt to witness. Why people who'd just stood next to him now looked at him like he was death itself. He lifted a hand, waved, like a peace offering. A stupid, kind wave. I turned. Fast. Didn't say a word. Didn't risk another second. Down the next street my lungs gave in. I inhaled sharp, shaky, held it again, inhaled slower. Let it creep in. No pain, not yet, no burn in the throat, no blood on the tongue, still clean, for now. Behind me, voices rose, low and angry, the kind that precede a mistake. I didn't turn, didn't want to know. If they chased him off, I didn't want to see it. If they didn't, I didn't want to see that either. Sometimes ignorance is the only decency left. Plague Alley had always had a name soaked in warning, but most days it was just a name. Not today. Today it remembered and reminded. I walked fast now, not a run. Running makes people look, but fast enough to feel the sweat return beneath my collar. My boots slipped once on something wet. I didn't check what, didn't care. 2 corners later, I passed a man with a mask. Not a real one. Scrap leather tied over his mouth and nose, holes punched into the sides, eyes wide. He carried a stick, long, tipped with iron, not for walking, for distance. He saw me, didn't stop, didn't speak, just kept moving the other way, fast as his limp would let him. His mask smelled like vinegar. I knew because the wind shifted and slapped me with it as he passed. It cut through the memory of the sneeze. Almost welcome. Almost. Further down, a merchant tossed out a bucket of water from his doorway. It hit the street with a splash that sent droplets toward my boots. I stepped aside. He glared at me. "Shouldn't be here," he muttered. "Neither should you," I replied. He didn't answer, didn't need to. We both knew nobody should be here, but someone always is. Near the edge of the alley, a rat darted across the stones, bold, fast. It paused just long enough to scratch its side, then vanished. Even the rats were uneasy today. Even they knew what a sneeze could cost. I found a bench made of 2 crates and a warped board. Sat, counted my breaths, listened for the rattle. Didn't find it. Yet. My hand went to my coat, felt the spot where I once kept the soap. Gone now. Long ago. Not that it would help. Not with this. You can't scrub breath, you can't wash fear. I closed my eyes, tried to think of anything else. But all I saw was the boy, standing there, alone, waving. And all I could think was, God help him if he sneezes again. The splash was warm. That was the first warning. It didn't patter like rain. It hit. A soft thud against my shoulder, then rolled down my neck with a kind of slow, sticky weight, like oil, or blood, or worse. My first mistake was walking down Gallows Street after midday. My second was looking up. I shouldn't have. I knew better. But instinct is older than reason, and some part of me still thought maybe, just maybe, this time it was water. Clean water from a jug, or a basin, or a rooftop gutter that hadn't been soaking in rot since the last harvest. I looked, just a glance, a single upward tilt of the chin, and the next drop landed square in my left eye. I didn't scream. That's how you let it in your mouth. Instead I froze, let the warmth settle on my lashes, my cheek, my throat. My tongue stayed pressed flat behind my teeth. I didn't move until I knew where it came from. Not who. What. Above me, a shutter swung lazily in the breeze. No face behind it, no warning. Just the soft creak of wood and the slow drip of something that shouldn't be that colour. Dark, oily, red-brown. Thick enough to slide, not fall. Whatever had spilled wasn't from a basin. It had come from a body, maybe meat, maybe man. I stepped head back. Careful, no sudden moves. If you panic, you slip. If you slip, you fall. If you fall here, the ground takes something from you. Once I was clear of the shadow, I wiped my face with my sleeve. Smell first, sour, metallic, not fresh, the stink of time, of blood left too long in the sun. Next I blinked. The eye burned, a slow itch, not blinding, not yet. I didn't rub it, that just drives it deeper. I'd seen that before. A man got pig's grease in his eye at the butcher's stall, kept blinking, then scratching. 2 days later, it swelled like a fruit and split. He screamed like someone boiling alive. He probably was. I turned a corner, found a low wall with a mossy crack, sat, checked my coat. Stained now. Left shoulder, one side of my neck. A fine arc across the top of my chest like someone had painted a warning sign with bile. I unfastened the top buttons, flicked off what I could. Nothing moved. Good. No worms. Yet. A boy passed. He looked at me, looked at the stain, looked up, then gave a low whistle. "Bad luck," he said. "Better me than you." He grinned. "Depends what you caught." He kept walking. Smart kid. The itch worsened. I dug into my coat, found a cloth. It was supposed to be clean, or close enough. I dabbed, gentle. The burn spread just a little. I told myself it was in my head. But that was lie number 3 today, and I'd only been up for 4 hours. People passed, no one stopped, no one asked. One man glanced at me, saw the stain, and crossed himself. Another crossed the street entirely. I didn't blame them. The city doesn't drip, it bleeds, slowly, randomly, without apology. Rooftops are just ceilings for things that shouldn't fall. I stood. The wet patch on my coat tugged as it cooled, stiffening into shape. I'd need to find a pump, or a bucket, or a horse trough, something I could rinse with before the stuff dried hard enough to trap heat, because heat breeds life. And in this city, life is rarely good. I followed the alley east, past the Tanner's Ridge and the door, with the 3 slashes painted across it, some old plague mark no one had scrubbed off. My boots scraped against cobble worn smooth by misfortune. My mouth stayed closed, tight, because I still hadn't swallowed. And I wouldn't, not until I knew what had touched my face. Near the fish stalls, I found a broken barrel half filled with rainwater. It stank, but not enough to be worse than what was on me. I crouched, splashed it on my shoulder, on my neck, on my face. The burn in my eye flared. I pressed the cloth again, soaked it, held it there, counted to 10, counted to 20. When I took it away, I could still see, barely, but that was enough. A woman nearby saw me. "Something fall?" she asked. Not something I wanted. She nodded like she knew the feeling. "Meat rot," she guessed. "Maybe. Worse if it twitches." We didn't speak after that. There was no point. I wrung out my cloth, watched the dirty water spiral down the drain. Brown turned red turned black, then gone, just like the man who dumped it, just like whatever made it. I didn't go back to Gallows Street. Some mistakes don't deserve a second glance. But I did look up once more. Later, at sunset, not out of curiosity, out of habit, and this time nothing fell. Just light, just a little warmth that didn't stick, didn't stink, didn't rot. But I didn't trust it, because this city only gives you light when it wants you to see something terrible clearly. It started with a whiff. I caught it halfway across the square, something sweet, thick, rotten at the edges, like fruit soaked in wine and left too long in the sun. Perfume. Not city perfume, imported, expensive. It clung to the air like an accusation, unwelcome and unearned, a scent that said, "I paid more for this than you'll see in a season. I followed it because you don't ignore something that doesn't belong." And then came the second smell. Sharp, raw, human, pit sweat, leather, iron, tooth rot. A scent so honest it slapped. When they collided, the air turned to soup. That's where I found them. 2 men in the square, 5 feet apart, glaring like enemies who hadn't earned swords yet. The first stood with his chest out, coat tailored, hair pulled back tight and oiled into place. His boots were licked clean by someone else's tongue. He reeked of citrus, jasmine, cloves. The other wore a shirt that had once been white. Now it was brown with the kind of sweat that soaks in, not out. His arms were bare. His breath carried across the cobbles. They weren't shouting, not yet. They just stood, challenging, like 2 dogs in the first moment before teeth meet throat. The square slowed around them. People stopped walking, not because of what they saw, because of what they smelled. It reached us like smoke. I covered my nose, but it was too late. The blend hit with full force, oil and rot, fruit and flesh, musk and mould. A woman gagged. A vendor stepped back from his stall. A baby cried, and no one blamed it. "You think that's scent?" the sweaty one said finally. His voice was gravel. The perfumed man smiled. "You'd know if you'd ever had a bath." "I wash in sweat," the other snapped. "Yours smells like you drank a flower and threw it up. You smell like you lost a fight with your own shirt." They took 1 step closer to each other. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't jeer, just braced. One old man whispered, "Not again." Apparently this wasn't their first match. The perfumed man raised his chin, pulled off a glove, slapped his own neck gently with it. The scent exploded. Rose and honey and the sharp vinegar edge of something artificially preserved. The other man responded by lifting both arms. No gesture, no words, just a full exposure of the underarms like a war standard raised. Someone behind me choked. The standoff stretched, sweat beading on foreheads, not just theirs. It was hot already. Now it felt like the sun itself was sweating. The combination was alive now, breeding, changing. Smells don't mix here, they fight. And this was a duel. Then the worst happened. Wind, just a breeze. But it rolled the scents together and sent them straight into the centre of the crowd. Someone retched, someone else ran. A rat emerged from under a stall and froze, tail twitching. I staggered a half step backward, blinking the sting from my eyes. The two men just smiled at each other. This wasn't about victory, it was about survival. The man with sweat leaned in, close enough to touch. "I stink of labour," he said. "You stink of lies." The perfumed man's smile thinned. "I stink of luxury." No difference, only difference that matters. They locked eyes. Then at last the perfumed man took a step back. A single half-step. Retreat, not surrender. He turned, walked away slowly, the cloud of his fragrance still clinging like fog behind a funeral cart. The other man watched him go, then dropped his arms, nodded to no one in particular, and spat on the cobblestones. The square breathed again, barely. The woman with the baby left. The rat ran. Vendors returned to hawking, but their voices were flat, like something had died and they didn't want to acknowledge it. I stayed. Not out of fascination, out of necessity. My nose had taken damage. It needed time. I sat on a low wall near a shuttered tea stall and let the last of the scent war curl up into the sky. The winner didn't matter. We all lost. A boy walked by, eyes watering. "What was that?" he asked no one. "Politics," someone muttered. "Perfume," someone else corrected. Same thing. I scratched my neck, still damp, still burned from earlier. The soap I used last week was long gone. Now my own stink was coming back, like a forgotten song with a sour verse. I took comfort in that. At least it was mine. The sun shifted. Shadows fell longer across the square. A vendor lit a lantern. The scent duel was already legend. I could hear it morphing in whispers. He slapped him with a glove soaked in brandy. The other one rubbed himself with onions before it started. All false, all true. That's how stories bloom in the rot. Fast, colourful, fatal. I stood. The stink still lingered in the walls of my nose. I didn't try to wipe it out. Let it settle. Let it remind me. This city never kills with steel first. It kills with air. And we all have to breathe. The floor was made of rushes, but they weren't fresh. They crunched underfoot, half-rotted, soaked through, tangled with hair and breadcrumbs and things I didn't try to name. They stuck to my boots as I stepped inside the room. Not a home. Not really. Just four walls, a door that didn't close properly, a window with no glass, just cloth stiff from old rain, a fireplace that hadn't seen flame in weeks. I didn't knock. No one does. I needed a place to sit, that's all. A dry spot, a corner where I could stop pretending to walk with purpose. So I entered. The smell hit first. Not filth, that was normal, not sweat, not rot. It was something worse, despair, not the kind that wails, the kind that goes still, old onions, damp wool, ash. From a long-dead fire, the breath of people too tired to care and too alive to stop. There were 4 of them in the room, 3 breathing, 1 not. I saw the body in the corner and thought, bedroll at first. Then the shape of the foot gave it away. Bare, curled, grey. No twitch, no rise. Just stillness, stretched out on a layer of straw, half covered in a blanket that didn't try very hard. No one looked at him. A man sat on a stool near the hearth, sharpening a blade that had no business looking that clean in a place this broken. A woman crouched near a bucket, wringing a cloth so worn it had become part of her fingers. A third figure, genderless, ageless, leaned against the wall, eyes closed, swaying just enough to be alive. I nodded once. No one returned it. I moved to the wall opposite the body, sat, kept my boots out of the wet patches. No one asked who I was. No one offered bread. No one offered blame. That was the deal here. You don't ask, and you don't look too long. I tried not to stare, at first, but the corpse had gravity. The eye drifts, even when you try to hold it still. It, was curled in a way that suggested he didn't die fast. One arm tucked, one shoulder pulled tight, like he'd tried to keep something warm that never came. His hair was thin, greasy in the parts that weren't dry and dusted with ash. His skin had turned a colour not found in any market. I didn't need to ask what killed him. It wasn't sickness. It was the same thing that eats everyone here eventually. Hunger, cold, and the slow realization that no one's watching. The woman spoke first, not to me, to the bucket. He's been dead 2 days. The man at the hearth didn't look up. He's not in the way, he said. He's in the corner. Same thing. The third figure didn't speak, didn't move. Might have been asleep. Might have been praying. Same thing. I asked finally, why not move him? The woman wrung the cloth, held it up, squeezed it once more. He's warmer than the wall. That was all. The man with the blade added, cart only comes Mondays. It was Thursday or Friday. I'd lost count. He kept sharpening. I didn't know what for. No one here was armed, no one here was dangerous, except maybe the still one by the wall. I reached into my coat, found a scrap of dried something. Meat, maybe. I didn't eat it. Didn't offer it either, just held it. Let it remind me I was still one rung above cold. For now, the corpse smelled faintly of tallow, not because he'd been near candles, because the body's last kindness is a slow melt. I turned my face toward the wall, looked at the crack in the plaster. It was shaped like a river, or a vein, or a path out. The woman dumped the bucket water into a trough by the door. It didn't slosh. It just settled, like it knew it would be ignored. No one cried, no one prayed. They'd already spent their grief. What remained? Ned was respect. Not for the dead, for the stillness. The man with the knife stood up, walked to the body, pulled the blanket up over the face. "You're making the guest nervous," he said. I wasn't nervous, just aware. He turned, sat back down, resumed sharpening. A cough echoed from outside, not deep, but dry. The woman looked up, then back down. Didn't change anything. One more cough wouldn't change the math in this room. I leaned my head against the wall, closed my eyes, listened. The scrape of the blade, the drip of the bucket, the shallow breath of strangers who weren't strangers. They were just survivors waiting to be still, and the sound of a body cooling in straw. I didn't stay long, didn't sleep, just sat until my legs stiffened and my heart slowed to the rhythm of the room. Then I stood. No one nodded, no one asked. I stepped out into the night, back into the damp bite of wind and the reek of alley ghosts. The corpse stayed behind. Of course he did. He belonged there. But I carried him with me anyway. In the smell on my coat, in the shape of his feet, in the silence we all shared. Because once you sit near stillness, you start to hear your own. It crowed at dusk. Not dawn. Dusk. Wrong end of the day, wrong side of town. The sound came sharp from a rooftop ledge just as the sun dropped behind the smoke-thick skyline, like the rooster had been waiting for the exact moment the city gave up. And it made eye contact. I swear it did. Feathers black as chimney soot, comb like a tattered flag, one eye a milky white that didn't blink right, but the other one, fixed straight on me. It let out another crow. Not a morning call, a challenge, a laugh. I stopped in the alley, wiped my face with my sleeve. I'd just climbed the hill behind the dye works, legs sore, belly empty, brain pulsing in my skull like it wanted out. I'd been spat on by words and worse. My boots were wet with something I hadn't identified yet. I was hungry enough to chew rope and tired enough to sleep on nails. And then came that sound again, a long nasal scream that told the world two things. Something was still alive, and that thing didn't respect me. I looked up. There it was, standing tall on a plank nailed to the rafters of a butcher's roof, a rooster, proud, filthy, surrounded by coiled rope and dried blood. It had no business still being alive in this city, but it was, and it crowed again, longer this time, slower, like it was winding up just for me. I narrowed my eyes, didn't move, didn't speak. I stared it down. The bird fluffed its feathers, tilted its head and gave me the look. The same one the perfumed noble had. The same one the nun gave me before she smeared fire across my face. The same one the woman in the soup line gave me when I asked if the meat was real. The "how are you still breathing?" Look. In this city, even the animals judge you. They live closer to the ground, closer to the truth. They see things we pretend aren't there. That bird had probably watched 3 murders, pecked at 2 of them, and still found time to neck me before sunset. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a pebble. Not to throw, just to feel it. Small, smooth, warm from my body. Something real, something silent. The rooster crowed again. I rolled the pebble between my fingers. 2 boys walked past behind me. One looked up. "Is that the one that pecked old Lena's eye?" "Yeah," the other said. "It sleeps in the meat smoke, can't die." "Why not?" Too angry. The bird shifted, turned its back on me, fluffed its feathers again, dismissed me, like I was just another pile of noise in a city full of rot. I put the pebble back in my coat. Let the insult stand, because picking a fight with a rooster meant you'd already lost, not the fight, the day, and maybe your place in the world. I moved on, tried to forget it, failed. I could still hear the echo in my ears. Mockery, and somehow clarity. Like the bird was the only honest thing I'd seen all week. I passed the bakery, closed, past the pig cart, empty, past the man with one boot and a violin missing all its strings. He didn't look at me. Didn't need to. My whole body screamed off key. Behind me, one last crow. Fainter now, but triumphant. I ducked into an archway near the old mill, sat on a stone ledge that used to be a foundation. Cracked, damp, still warmer than standing. Took off one boot, shook out the straw that had crept in like guilt, scratched the side of my foot. Thought about what I'd eat, if I had anything left. Nothing came to mind. Not because I wasn't hungry, but because taste had become a memory, not a desire. A rat skittered past. It paused, sniffed the air, looked up, toward the rooster, then kept going. Smart creature. No one wants trouble with gods, and that's what that bird was. A small feathered deity of disrespect. The wind shifted, carried the last scent of the day. Smoke, grease, tallow, wet fur, metal. And underneath, it all, the faintest hint of roasted something. Not food, just a reminder that life continued, and I wasn't invited. I stood again, my knees cracked, my breath fogged. The rooster was gone now, hidden behind tiles and time, but its voice lingered in the walls, in my chest, in the back of my throat where bitterness sits just before it becomes a laugh. I didn't laugh, didn't cry either, just walked. One more step, one more hour, until I found something quieter than my own thoughts. I returned home, if you can call it that. The door was still ajar, same as I'd left it, crooked on one hinge, squealing just enough to remind you not to trust it. The wood bowed from damp. A rat's tail disappeared behind the threshold just before I stepped through. Inside, the air was thick and familiar. Not warm, just used. It smelled like breath held too long, sweat that never fully left, and the faintest whisper of something mildewed but not yet mould, the scent of a room that knows you too well to pretend. I shut the door behind me with my foot. Didn't latch, didn't matter. Anyone who wanted in wouldn't be stopped by wood. The straw rustled as I crossed the floor, not just underfoot, from within. It had settled while I was gone, flattened, cooled, grown bored of waiting, but now it stirred. It made a sound like whispering paper or dry lungs, like it had been holding its breath too. I knelt beside the pile, my bed. A mound of rushes and thatch, picked through a dozen times, patched with rags, and rearranged nightly to trick my back into believing it was new. It wasn't, but it was mine, and it didn't ask questions. I lowered myself into it with the care of someone who's learned what hides beneath. Something shifted inside the straw. Small. Alive. I didn't flinch. I just lay still, let the room recognize me again, let it remember my shape. A few pieces of straw clung to my coat. I brushed them off. They clung again. I gave up. The ceiling above me sagged slightly in the middle, water-stained and black with soot from the candle I never lit anymore. I stared at it for a while, counted the cracks, same number as before. No new ones, small victories. A groan came from the wall to my left, either the boards expanding from night air, or the man 2 rooms over shifting in his sleep, or dying. Hard to tell anymore. Either way, it didn't involve me, so I stayed where I was. My boots stayed on. I didn't have the energy to pull them off, didn't trust what might climb inside while I slept. The last time I'd taken them off, I woke up with a centipede curled between my toes. It hadn't bitten, but I'd bitten my own tongue trying not to scream. I pulled my coat tighter. It still smelled like alley and blood, but it was the only thing that kept my ribs from arguing with the wind. I coughed once, not hard, just enough to hear myself again. Then silence. The straw beneath me settled like lungs deflating. The room cooled a little more. The air got heavier, not quieter, just slower. Like it was waiting for something to happen, or not happen. I closed my eyes, didn't sleep, just stopped looking. The rat came back around midnight. I heard it near the far wall. Soft padding feet, sniffing. It didn't come close. It just confirmed I was here, and that I hadn't brought food. Then it left. A draft pushed in through the wall slats, whispered down the side of my face. I pulled the blanket, what was left of it, up to my chin. It had holes, more now than last week. But it held shape. For now. I thought of the rooster, of the body in the rushes, of the boy who sneezed, of the woman who smeared fire on my face and smiled like she'd done me a favour. And I thought of how none of them would be here when I woke up. If I woke up. Just me. just this straw. Learning how to breathe again. A breath in, the smell of dust. A breath out, the sound of nothing. And then finally, stillness. Not peace, not rest, just stillness, that'll do. I woke up still wearing yesterday. Didn't need to look at my coat to know it was stiff with grime, or lift my arm to know the stench had settled in deep. My body was no longer something separate from the city. It had become part of it. The straw whispered as I moved, a slow crinkle, not fresh, not kind, like it was saying, "Still here? Thought you'd be gone by now." I sat up, cracked my neck. My joints ached like they owed someone money. I scratched my arm, felt flakes come loose, not skin, not all of it, just residue. The day. Yesterday, the day before, the week before. The city doesn't wash off, it just layers. I reached down and pulled off one boot. The sock inside stayed behind. I peeled it away. It stuck in places. There was something black under one of my toenails. I didn't check what. If you name it, it becomes real. The light outside had changed, still grey, still thin. But with that early morning chill that wraps itself around your ankles and settles under your ribs, I wanted to go outside. I didn't want to be inside, but I didn't want to move either, so I sat, and I smelled myself. It wasn't just stink, it was memory. Every patch of sweat, every crusted smudge, every dried flake and burn, each one told a story. The rat that shared my straw 2 nights ago, the herbal smear from the nun, still faint behind my ears, the oily splash that fell from a window and hit my cheek with the weight of something recently dead, the butcher's smoke, the perfumed noble, the plague alley sneeze, the rooster, all of it still clung, not metaphorically, literally. I stood, finally, and my knees cracked like floorboards. The blanket fell from my shoulders, limp and stiff at once. The chill didn't bother me, because I was warmer now than I'd ever been. Not from heat, from friction. A kind of slow combustion under the skin, built from grime and survival. I scratched my jaw, else stubble caked with something that wasn't just dirt. I lifted my sleeve and sniffed the fabric near my wrist. It smelled like vinegar and sweat and some kind of bitter herb. Goethe's blend, maybe. Still fighting whatever infection I'd picked up a week ago. Still losing, but holding the line. I found the cracked mirror on the wall, held up a shard just large enough to catch my face. I looked, and I saw something that might once have been me, buried beneath soot and daze and silence, eyes too tired to blink fast, a nose that flared at every breath, lips cracked, brow red from whatever the nun had smeared across it, skin a patchwork of what I'd touched, what I'd slept on, what I'd walked through. I was worn in, like a boot left too close to fire, not ruined, just converted. I pulled off my coat, turned it inside out. The inside smelled worse, sweat soaked into the seams, salt stains like ghosts of old exertions. I dropped it on the floor, sat back down, stared at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, just from being used too often without thanks. I rubbed my palms together, dry, calloused, tacky. They squeaked, like the city didn't want to let go, like the city had crawled under my nails and planted itself there. Like I was no longer separate from the cobblestones or the alley steam or the barrel stench. I was just another layer. I picked up the bucket I used for washing. Empty. Of course. I'd meant to fill it, days ago. I smelled the rim. Even the metal remembered better days. Bath. Pointless. Soap. Gone. Prayer. Laughed at me. Perfume. Please. There wasn't a single scent in the world strong enough to cover what I'd become. Not anymore. I leaned back against the wall, took a long, slow breath, felt it drag through my chest like a rope through ash. Didn't cough, didn't sigh, just breathed, and tasted everything. The butcher's stall, the boiled socks, the incense and the rot, the tavern and its fireless heat, the corpse in the corner house, the rooster's crow. It was all still here. I was still here, but I wasn't clean, not outside, not inside. And the strangest part? I didn't want to be. Because to scrub it off would mean forgetting. To smell sweet would mean I still believed in the lie of distance. That I wasn't this. That I hadn't earned this scent, this crust, this shape. But I had. Every drop, every layer, every smear. This wasn't filth anymore, it was mine. I closed my eyes. Not because I was tired, though I was. Not because I needed sleep, though I did. But because the day had folded in on itself, and I didn't want to look at what was left. Outside, someone shouted, "Godaloo!" Loud, sloppy. Too late to be polite, too early to be forgiven. A splash followed. I didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't even blink. The sound of waste hitting stone is just punctuation here. I lay back in the straw, let it wrap around my shoulders. It didn't itch anymore. It had grown used to me, or maybe I'd grown into it. The smell no longer registered. Or maybe it did, and my mind had filed it under permanent. Someone coughed in the room next door, a low, wet cough, the kind you don't recover from. But no one screamed, no one knocked, because that's his wall, that's his air. We all have our own slices of decay to manage. I curled one hand under my head, felt the dried sweat on my neck. It tugged when I moved, like my skin was being unwrapped from itself. I didn't bother adjusting. The body learns to live in knots. Outside, footsteps passed. One pair, slow, then another, faster, then nothing. The lull between crimes. I thought of the boy who sneezed, the rooster that judged me, the nun who smiled as she burned my forehead, the corpse in the straw, the perfume that lingered longer than its wearer. I remembered the taste of that pickled meat, the sting of soap, the way the tavern laughed after I did. I remembered the silence after someone fell in the market, and how nobody looked. And through it all, I stayed, not out of pride, not out of strength. Because the city doesn't ask you to be strong, it asks you to be still, still enough to be ignored, still enough to be forgotten, still enough to survive. The wood above me creaked, a mouse skittered through the rafters, something hissed behind the wall. I didn't react. You only lose when you respond. The wind crawled in through the cracks and traced my ankles like it was learning me again. I welcomed it. Let it find what it wanted. Let it go. My eyes stayed closed. My breathing slowed. Not into sleep, into pause. A kind of half-death, where the muscles stop complaining, where the stomach forgets, where the body gives up on clean, and the soul pretends it never needed light. I heard someone outside dry heaving, then laughing, then silence again. The city chewing and swallowing in the dark. I pulled the blanket over my chest. It didn't reach my feet. It never did, but I didn't fix it. That's tomorrow's problem. If tomorrow comes, and it will, because the city doesn't stop. It grinds, it stretches, it opens its mouth wide every morning and dares you to crawl back in. And I will, because this is life now. This is breath. This is me. I sleep in the stink. I sleep in the echo of my own heartbeat against stone. I sleep in the city that takes and takes, but I'm still here. And tomorrow, again.